Welcome to the fantasy. Marvel. Enlightenment against the sky, my magic is completely forbidden. Chapter 61. On the other side, Tony Stark got up from the ground a little embarrassed. Black Dwarf's strength was originally above him. In addition, his own defense is also very amazing. Most of the thermal weapon attacks fell on him, unable to cause him damage. Even if he used a laser attack, the effect was very insignificant. Tony, are you all right? Hawkeye and Black Widow quickly ran to his side, helped him up, and then looked at him with a bit of nervousness. Tony Stark shook his head. He said a little helplessly, "This big guy is not easy to deal with. The moment he sneaked up just now, if I hadn't reacted quickly, it would have been miserable now." Hawkeye and Black Widow looked at each other. The big man in front of him looks like another copy of the Hulk. The destructive power is amazing, and its own defense is also very strong. In the past, they have relied on the Hulk to turn the tide of the war. And now, such a big guy is opposite them. I feel a little uncomfortable no matter how I think about it. And at this very time, Black Dwarfs didn't give them any time to stop. Attacked Iron Man Tony Stark again. Huge weapon, smashed on Tony Stark's head. Tony Stark pushed Hawkeye and Black Widow away, and then he slapped himself on the ground, using the countershock force to dodge Black Dwarf's attack. Black Dwarf let out a violent roar, and then threw out the weapon in his hand like a meteor hammer. Black Widow and Hawkeye didn't notice for a while, were directly implicated, and were shot out. Just in the nick of time. A spider silk pulled the two back. "Hey, man, beauty, are you all right?" Peter Parker grinned at Hawkeye and Black Widow. Before the two could speak, Tony Stark, who was lying on the ground next to him, looked at him with a surprised expression. "Peter, why are you here?" Quote, seeing Peter Parker's appearance, Tony Stark was visibly stunned. Peter Parker shrugged and said, "Originally, I was going to visit the Museum of Modern Art." And as soon as he finished saying this, he was hammered by Black Dwarf with a punch. Just as Black Dwarf was preparing to pursue him and give him a fatal blow. At the foot of the Black Dwarf suddenly rose a thick pillar of earth, which soared him into the sky. The position of the Black Dwarf moved, and the direction in which the huge weapon fell also changed. Tony Stark quickly rushed to Peter Parker's side and helped him out of the Black Dwarf's attack range. "Mr. Stark, what the hell is going on with this big guy? Also, what the hell was that earthen pillar just now?" Quote. Tony Stark took a deep breath and then explained to him. "This guy is an alien, and he came to snatch a magician's gem. As for that earthen pillar, it must have been made by a woman. Woman, Spider-Man Peter Parker has just arrived and does not know much about the battle situation." He looked around, and he didn't see anyone other than Black Widow. And just as he thought so, he saw a woman floating in the sky. And the woman was staring at the Black Dwarf with a cold face. With her fingers spread, a huge tornado formed under her hand, and the tornado flew out of her hand, and then wrapped the Black Dwarf cluster that rushed into the sky by the earth pillar, fixing him in the air. Looking at Mela's mighty appearance, his eyes couldn't help but bring a little shock. He couldn't help but look at Tony Stark, and then asked with a bit of surprise, "Mr. Tony Stark, who is this beautiful young lady?" Quote, "She turned out to be so powerful, how come she had never seen him before?" Tony Stark couldn't help but smile bitterly. Where did he know who this woman in front of him was? He only knew that this woman was following Lin Ang. She didn't talk much before, and he always thought she was just a vase. Looking at it now, this woman's strength is only stronger than that of the Scarlet Witch. I don't know where she came from. I just knew that she had been following a mage named Lin Ang, and I just learned that she had such a powerful power, with the power to control water and earth. Oh yes, this big guy came to grab the gem of the mage named Lin Ang. Strong, it's simply too strong." Peter Parker looked at Mela with adoration. Mela glanced sideways at Peter Parker, then smiled at him and said, "That's because you haven't seen what it means to be truly powerful." Mela couldn't help but look in the direction where Lin Ang and Ebony Throat were. If they were to see the true strength of Lord Lin Ang, they would know what a real strong person was. Lin Ang sighed. Lin Ang commanded everyone around him. Wong and Mordo are sent back to Karmatage by him, and their mission is to stop Koichi. Ji Yuyi's strength is beyond reproach. With her, these subordinates of Thanos are not enough to see. And he also needs to scavenge the ability of these intruders, and now he can't let Ji Yi make a move. Mela asks him to send to support Iron Man. Although Black Dwarf's strength is not as good as Ebony Throat, it is not something that Iron Man, Black Widow and Hawkeye can deal with, and he doesn't want to collect their corpses as soon as the battle on this side is over. As for Nick Fury and Dr. Banner, who now have no combat power, he let Wong and Mordo teleport away. Now, in the entire street, only he and Ebony Throat remained. In his opinion, he had completely mastered the power of the Ebony Throat, so he did not continue to stalemate. And in the opinion of Ebony Throat, Lin Ang actually stood up, and also asked Mela to help Tony Stark and the others deal with Black Dwarf, which is his plan succeeded. He couldn't help but be overjoyed in his heart, just because his language temptation had succeeded. At this time, the Ebony Throat said with a bit of pride, "Guardian of the Gem of Time, I'm giving you one last chance. If you hand over the Time Gem now, we will naturally leave automatically, so that you can keep everything you want. Karma-Taj is very important to you, right? As long as you hand over the Time Gem, I promise, Karma-Taj will not have anything to ask for. If not, I think you'll see with your own eyes the destruction of Karma-Taj." Ebony still had a bit of demagogic energy fluctuations in his words. And Lin Ang just looked at him lightly. After a long while, Lin Ang sighed softly, and then learned his appearance and said lightly, "Ebony Throat, son of Thanos, why don't I show you a clear way? You betrayed Thanos, made an oath, loyal to me, and returned to me, and I let you live, what do you think?" Ebony Throat's expression suddenly changed. His face darkened for a moment. "Are you looking for death yourself?" Ebony's Throat was furious, his hand quietly behind his back, and then secretly activated his mental power. Countless stone cones quietly formed behind Lin Ang. Ebony Throat's face did not show the slightest hint of weakness, and said with a bit of mockery and ridicule, "You're just an indigenous human on this little asteroid. What qualifications and abilities do you have for me to betray Lord Thanos? Your strength, compared to Lord Thanos, is simply insignificant." Ebony Throat said, his fingers behind his back shaking slightly. The stone cones that condensed behind Lin Ang immediately flew towards Lin Ang like hundreds of machine gun colleagues. And for his sneak attack, Lin Ang just shook his head lightly and sighed softly. "Hey, sneak attacks are not a good habit." Saying that, Lin Ang only glanced faintly at the stone cones that were about to shoot at him, and then read a word. Fall. In an instant, those stone cones that were about to hit Lin Ang's body suddenly seemed to be suppressed by some powerful pressure. In an instant, they all fell to the ground, smashing countless holes of all sizes on the ground. Ebony Throat looked at Lin Ang in disbelief, and he couldn't help but frown. At that moment just now, he seemed to feel an unknown power. The existence of that kind of power seems to be related to the word in Lin Ang's mouth. That word seemed to directly mobilize some kind of power, and then the stone cone he controlled changed. Is that the power of a human magician just now? It's fun. He squinted his eyes and wondered if he wanted to attack Lin Ang again. Another battlefield some distance from here. Mela, Tony Stark, Hawkeye, Black Widow, and Peter Parker all looked in the direction of Lin and Ebony Throat. At that moment, they seemed to instinctively sense that something was wrong. But what is wrong, they can't say. It was as if at that moment, some rules overlapped. However, before they could figure out what was going on, the Black Dwarf had already attacked them again. They had to go into battle again. Ebony hesitated and decided to have a confrontation with Lin Ang head-on. Relying on his mental power, he flew out of thin air and approached Lin Ang at an extremely fast speed. The sharp and slender fingers stretched forward, pointing directly at Lin Ang's chest. A transparent Wang Mo Jiao wind blade like a tornado condensed at his fingertips, stabbing straight towards Lin Ang's chest. Lin Ang stood in place, motionless, and just when Ebony Throat was about to reach him, he raised his right hand. For him, people who have no value, there is no need to waste time. Now time, that's precious. Lin Ang didn't give Ebony Throat time to react at all. Directly gave him a dark Omega Ray. At the moment when the dark Omega Ray appeared, Ebony Throat only felt that his whole soul seemed to tremble, which was an instinctive fear of danger. This feeling of fear was never felt even in Thanos. For a while, Ebony Throat regretted it a little. When facing Wang, Mordo, and Mela, he had a feeling that this kid named Lin Ang seemed to be stronger than them. But he couldn't do it. Lin Ang would be so much stronger than those people. Ebony Throat only felt that his scalp was numb at this time. He subconsciously stepped back, bursting out all his energy, and used his mental power to lay one mental barrier after another around his body. He used those barriers to isolate himself and Lin Ang, as if trying to use these things to isolate the attack that Lin Ang used. And Lin Ang shot dark omega rays at him as if he didn't see the barriers he had laid down. Ebony Throat looked at the heavy protection he had laid and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. However, this breath had just been relieved, and before he could breathe, a scene that shocked him appeared. The straight rays that Lin Ang shot out did not even attack the mental barriers he had laid down. Instead, before touching those barriers, he refracted and turned a corner directly to attack from his left side. This sudden change caught Ebony Throat off guard. Seeing the ray turn a corner, Ebony Throat's face changed greatly, and a despair instantly spread in his mind. What the hell is this? He couldn't help but scold secretly in his heart. The Ebony Throat began to arrange mental barriers in all directions of itself. He thought about this secretly in his heart. Before touching the mental barrier, this terrifying ray was refracted. It seems that the mental barrier is useful for this ray. As long as he was fast enough to be able to dislike the mental shield around him, then there was no way for this hateful magician in front of him to do anything to him. And just as he thought so, the dark omega ray had completely ignored the mental barrier he had arranged. Directly bombarded him. Ebony's eyes suddenly widened, and he watched in disbelief as the dark omega rays bombarded his body. At the moment of being hit, he even had a ridiculous idea. He was dreaming, he must be dreaming. The mental barriers he had just laid were actually torn apart like paper. Not even a little blocking effect worked. This is simply fake. And seeing that the Ebony Throat was hit, Lin Ang lightly lowered his hand. In fact, as early as when Lin Ang emitted dark omega rays, the end was already preordained. It is absolutely impossible for Ebony Throat to get out of here alive. Just as he thought, hit by a dark omega ray, but in an instant, the Ebony Throat disappeared, and he couldn't even scream. And on another battlefield not far from them, Tony Stark looked down the ship with a bit of panic. Friday, what exactly is that black pillar of light that rushed into the sky just now? Just as they were fighting, a black pillar of energy light refracted in the air. The huge energy coercion made them almost breathless. Such a huge energy beam is definitely an extremely dangerous existence. Not sure yet, I'm testing. Quick, find out as soon as possible what that energy pillar is. Quote. Omega rays. Mela looked in the direction below the ship. Originally, there were many buildings and trees in the battlefield on this side and Lin Ang's side. But with the attack of Ebony Throat on Lin Ang, the surrounding trees, dirt, sand, and even buildings were all reduced to debris. Now, they can clearly see the situation over there. The black beam of light passed through the mental barrier under the Ebony Throat cloth without hindrance. The moment the beam touches the Ebony Throat disappears completely, as if it never existed. Black, dark omega rays, what the hell is that? Quote. Black Widow looked at Mela with a bit of shock. The black energy light pillar that rushed into the sky just now was obviously far away from her, but it gave her a tremor from her soul. That trembling, even now, has not disappeared. Mela said with a bit of adoration. What the hell is that? I don't know, and I can't say. Then I know that this omega effect ray can fundamentally erase a person's existence, and can also resurrect a person. Mela said with a bit of pride. Not long ago, Lord Lin Ang used this omega ray to kill the new god of the Apocalypse Star and became the owner of the divine right of the Apocalypse Star. Hawkeye took a deep breath, then suppressed the fear in his heart. At the moment when the dark omega ray appeared, he couldn't even hold the bow and arrow. And seeing the Ebony Throat is so dead, he was a little stunned. It happened too fast. The Ebony Throat that could use his mind to attack, beating them on the head that could not be lifted. It's only 3 or 5 minutes in Lin Ang's hands. He actually died like that. Isn't that a little too unreal? Oh, Tony Stark couldn't help but snort. Then he said with envy with points. This thing looks a lot better than laser rays. I don't know if this thing can be added to my armor. Peter Parker looked over there with a bit of surprise. Who is that handsome gentleman? His ability seems to be very powerful, can I get to know him? Quote. Tony Stark looked at Lin Ang, and then said with a bit of complexity. He is the bitter lord who was targeted by these aliens this time. Peter Parker raised an eyebrow. That's really unfortunate for these aliens. Although he had not had any frontal contact with Lin Ang, he had just raised his hand and turned over the strength of the enemy on the other side. These aliens are obviously looking for a hard bone to gnaw. Oh my god, here's what's going on. Quote. Nick Fury and Dr. Banner helped each other towards this side. They looked at Lin Ang not far away with a bit of incredulity. What about the terrifying guy who claimed to be the son of Thanos just now? Nick Fury asked. He's dead, Mr. Nick Fury. Peter Parker pointed to a mess on Leon's side. And Nick Fury couldn't help but widen his eyes. On the side of Lin, there is an ebony throat, and some are just ruins all over the ground. And Dr. Banner couldn't help but widen his eyes. He looked at the situation over there in disbelief. You said Ebony Throat died. Is he really dead? How did he die? Quote. He and Nick Fury had just been thrown down the next street. They ran all the way back and saw that the Ebony Throat had been dried out. Isn't that too fast? When they were teleported away, it seemed that their side was still suppressed by the Ebony Throat. Hawkeye pointed at Lin Ang, and then said with a bit of admiration. It's Mr. Karmatage's mage. He was alone and killed the Ebony Throat. After speaking, he added, it only took one trick. Quote. After listening to Hawkeye, Dr. Banner was even more shocked. The Ebony Throat is powerful, he has seen it more than once. Don't see that he was suppressed by Mela before, and then killed by Lin Ang in a second. But, in fact, this guy is unusually strong. Previously, on the Asgard ship, he had witnessed his killing. Even if it is as strong as the Asgardian, in front of that guy just now, it is completely vulnerable. Not even a little resistance. But now, Lin Ang actually killed the Ebony Throat. And it's still a one-trick kill. This is simply fake. Banner couldn't help but rub his brows. I always feel that things seem to be much better than I thought. Blue Star has the presence of Lin Ang, maybe there will be a glimmer of life. And Nick Fury next to him was stunned for a long time, and then finally came to his senses. He took 2 deep breaths, and then looked at Lin Ang with fiery eyes. The eagerness and joy in that gaze were even more fanatical than seeing a very beautiful woman. He suppressed the excitement in his heart. He had a hunch that this supreme mage named Lin Ang was the person he needed. With such strength, he is calm in the face of any danger. It's perfect. And Black Widow's eyes looking at Lin Ang were a little strange. Magician, she is not without sight. Even during her mission, she fought with some magicians. But those magicians were completely different from Lin Ang. Compared with Lin Ang, their strength is simply a world apart. She had never seen that magician as powerful as Lin Ang. Compared to those magicians, Lin Ang seemed to be a different kind of existence. Is this the difference between a supreme mage and a common mage? And over there, Lin glanced in the direction of Tony Stark, Black Widow, Hawkeye, and Mela. Seeing Mela use the control of fire that she already masterfully controlled, she burned Black Dwarf beyond recognition. Lin Ang nodded in satisfaction. Then he looked at his feet. From below the spaceship, straight past the New York Temple. Everything around was in ruins, except for the New York Temple, a building that stood alone. Of course, if it weren't for Lin Ang's previous layers of protection on the New York Temple. Today's ruins should have one more. Alas. Lin Ang sighed softly, and then took out the Agamo Eye from his neck. He borrows the power of the Time Gem to repair everything around him. Under the influence of the Time Gem, the surrounding streets, vegetation, and buildings began to be restored one by one. As the surroundings are repaired, the time paradox emerges. Lin Ang half squinted his eyes and looked at the time paradox that appeared around him. The temporal paradox is constantly spreading towards the periphery. The speed of diffusion is extremely fast, and they seem to want to swallow everything up. Lin Ang, on the other hand, raised his hand and used the repair time. Little by little, the time paradox disappeared. Because Mela suppressed Black Dwarf, several people from the Avengers basically watched the whole time. Watching Lin Ang restore the street so easily, restoring it to its original appearance. They all couldn't help but open their mouths. Hiss, isn't this magic too convenient? Tony Stark said with a bit of surprise. Black Widow looked at Lin Ang over there and couldn't help but go up. The rich rely on technology, the poor rely on mutation, and now there is even this kind of ghost. How can ordinary people like us live? Hear Black Widow say that. Tony Stark couldn't help but shake his head. Hey. Quote. Natasha, I don't think you should compare him with us. This is a monster, we don't deserve to be with him. And Nick Fury looked at Lin Ang's behavior, and looked at his eyes even more eagerly. These superheroes under his hands do have some strength. But one by one, they only know sabotage and engage in things, and there is no chance to know how to deal with the aftermath. It's a pity that according to Lin Ang's identity and status, it is doomed that he may not be able to invite him to S.H.I.E.L.D. And at this time, the Black Dwarf suddenly fell heavily in front of Nick Fury, and it was about to die. Mela had also raised her arm, intending to control the water molecules in his body and give him the final blow. Seeing this, Nick Fury stopped it again and again. If he hadn't seen the Black Dwarf fall in front of him, he would have forgotten that there was another powerful magician here. Wait, Miss Mela, Nick Fury shouted loudly. I think we need to leave this alive and let him tell us something about Thanos, what do you think? Mela frowned, and then turned her gaze to Lin Ang. Lin Ang felt that there were many eyes on his body and looked in their direction. Looking at the Black Dwarf on the ground, he raised his eyebrows slightly, and then came to their side with an instantaneous movement. Lord Lin Ang, how did he deal with it? Mela asked. Respected Mr. Supreme Mage, there were many offenses from previous events. At the moment I think we need his intelligence. I wonder if you can. Lin Ang nodded. Although he felt that this was completely unnecessary, guarding the Blue Star was also the duty of S.H.I.E.L.D. They want to know some information through Black Dwarf, and it doesn't hurt to give it to them. Mela. Lin Ang shouted at Mela. Mela released her clenched hand. The water molecules surrounding the Black Dwarf also suddenly scattered. The huge body of the Black Dwarf, like a dead dog, fell heavily to the ground. Looking at the Black Dwarf on the ground, Nick Fury was overjoyed. With Black Dwarf, they can know some information and not have a black eye. Hawkeye, Black Widow, and Tony Stark looked at Mela in amazement. The first time I saw Mela was when Lin appeared at the door of the New York temple with Mela. At that time, they had no other feelings except that this girl was beautiful. But now they found out. They were wrong, this was not only a beautiful woman, but also a mage who was so powerful that they were stressed. She is even stronger than everyone in the Avengers. And Dr. Banner is now somewhat numb. He looked at Mela a little dumbfounded, then at the Black Dwarf on the ground, and finally at Lin Ang. He always felt like he was dreaming. Were these the same people he had seen before on the Adgarth ship? Are those terrible guys who will slaughter most of the mighty Adgasians? Why did things become a little different after coming to Blue Star? Are these guys getting weaker, or are these magicians too strong? How had he not heard of it before? Is a magician such a strong existence? Tony Stark disarmed himself and looked around. This sudden attack made him fully understand the seriousness of the matter. It's really a big deal. At the invitation of Tony Stark, everyone went to the Avengers base. And they just arrived at the base, and all they saw was a somewhat helpless Captain America and a sad witch. Steve, Wanda, quote, what's going on with you guys? Looking at the two, everyone in the Avengers couldn't help but be stunned. Steve subconsciously glanced at Wanda, and then lowered his voice. Vision was captured. What? Everyone was taken aback. They couldn't help but think of the mind gem, and everyone's hearts tugged. Lin Ang narrowed his eyes slightly. He couldn't help but look at Wanda and Captain America. According to the original plot, Vision and Scarlet Witch should have been saved. It's just that now Black Widow, Hawkeye, Nick Fury and others have come to the New York temple. It is estimated that this led to this result. Nick Fury looked at Wanda, then frowned. That means that Thanos is likely to have obtained the mind gem from Vision now. Then doesn't he already have 3 Infinity Stones in his hand? Nick Fury's heart was full of tension and helplessness. And Lin Ang shook his head at him. To be precise, he should have already got 4 pieces. Hearing Lin Ang's voice, Captain America looked in Lin Ang's direction. When he found Lin Ang and Mela, he was obviously stunned. He didn't know who the 2 men behind Nick Fury were, and he didn't know why they were here. Captain America looked at Nick Fury, and then at Lin and Mela. He seemed to be wondering if the two people in front of him were new to their team. Who is this? Captain America asked Nick Fury. Nick Fury seemed to remember that he and Wanda didn't know Lin and Mela yet. He quickly introduced both sides. Oh, sorry, I forgot to make the introduction. Nick Fury solemnly walked to Lin Ang's side, and then introduced Captain America. This is the Ringgong magician, the supreme mage of Karma-Taj. Looking at Nick Fury's excited look, Captain America raised his eyebrows slightly. Ringgong magician, he hadn't heard of it. Karma-Taj, it seems, has heard of it somewhere, but is not familiar. Also, what is a supreme mage? Is it the level of a magician? Is this level powerful? But it sounds like a great deal. Nick Fury saw Captain America's look in doubt. His heart clicked, and he couldn't help but secretly say in his heart, Steven should not have committed the same problem as before. Ahem, ahem. Nick Fury coughed twice, and then said with a hint of warning. Don't look at Sorcerer Lin Ang and underestimate him at a young age. His strength is probably higher than all of you combined. It is not an exaggeration to say that he is the strongest existence of Blue Star. After hearing this, not only Captain America was stunned, but even Wanda, who had been immersed in grief, couldn't help but raise her head. Better than all of them combined. Really fake. Captain America couldn't help but look at Lin Ang. It's just that Lin Ang has always looked faint, and he can't see Lin Ang's depth at all. He couldn't help but narrow his eyes, and then looked towards Mela behind Lin Ang. Mela lowered her head and fiddled with her hair. In addition to her high appearance and being the most beautiful woman present, she looks quite harmless. Captain America couldn't help but frown, and then set his gaze on Iron Man. Tony Stark, this guy is always big and will not buy into anyone. Nick Fury just said so firmly that Lin Ang's strength is stronger than all of them, and it is stronger than all of them combined. What's more, Nick Fury also said that Lin is the strongest existence in the entire Blue Star. Tony Stark, he wouldn't buy it. But Ken was fast, and Captain America couldn't help but shrink his pupils. Because he found that Tony Stark did not seem to have the slightest objection to Nick Fury's words. He even nodded heavily after Nick Fury finished speaking. He didn't have any intention of refuting, not the slightest dissatisfaction. Captain America looked at Iron Man incredulously. This was something that was absolutely impossible before. And now, it's gone. It seems to see the suspicion and disbelief of Captain America and Wanda. Spider-Man Peter Parker stepped forward with a bit of excitement to explain the glorious deeds of Mela and Lin to the two. The more he spoke, the more excited he became, and finally he looked at Lin Ang and Mela's eyes with a bit of adoration and fanaticism. At first, both Captain America and Wanda felt that Nick Fury had said something too much. What is stronger than all of them combined? What Blue Star is the strongest? However, with Peter Parker's explanation, the more they listened, the wider their eyes became. Although they do not know the strength of Ebony Throat and Black Dwarf. But they had seen the power of Thanos' other men. In the hands of those people, Wanda and Vision were almost defenseless. Otherwise, Vision would not have been dug up by someone and dug up the mind gem and opened a huge hole in the head. They all know the strength of the enemy. But such a powerful enemy, Mela was able to press the other party to fight, and even grind Black Dwarf to death. And Lin Ang even made a move, and the Ebony Throat was seconds in one move. Their strength is indeed stronger than all of them combined. Wanda looked a little excited. She stood up abruptly, and looked at Lin Ang with a bit of panic, excitement, and pleading. Mage Lin Ang, I beg you to help me avenge Vision. As long as you are willing to make a move, I am willing to pay any price. Wanda looked excited, and her state was obviously not quite right at this time. Seeing her like this, Captain America quickly wanted to divert the topic. It's just that Wanda, who has been lost in his eyes by personal hatred, does not give him the slightest chance to divert from the topic at this time. Her eyes were red, and with a wave of her hand, she knocked Captain America out. Captain America, who was sent out, looked stunned. He didn't expect Wanda to suddenly attack him. Wanda, seeing her suddenly make a move, everyone present couldn't help but be stunned. Then she couldn't help but look at Wanda with some vigilance. Her current situation seemed to be very wrong. Lin Ang raised his eyebrows and looked at Wanda. Today's Wanda has not fully grown. Now she is not capable enough. Even in such a state of anger and violence, the power that erupts is not too strong. It is not comparable to the Scarlet Witch who worries Ultron. Lin Ang walked slowly in front of Wanda. I should do what you say. In any case, the plan of the director of the Universal Family Planning Office cannot be realized. Anyway, it is necessary to dry purple sweet potato essence, white to get a benefit, why not? Although Wanda's strength is not enough now, this is a potential stock. After speaking, Lin Ang looked at Wanda and said one word, sleep. Quote. Then, Wanda, who had already had a bit of a violent trend, actually blinked his eyelids twice, and then closed his eyes. Watching Wanda close her eyes, her body kept shaking, and she was about to fall to the ground. Black Widow Natasha quickly stepped forward, put her arm around her shoulders, and took her in her arms. Seeing that Wanda calmed down, everyone present couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. There seemed to be something more in Captain America's eyes when he looked at Lin Ang. Listening to what others say is far less than what you see with your own eyes. Wanda, who wants to subdue and is lost by hatred and falls into a state of rampage, is not easy to control. And Lin Ang, he just said one word, and Wanda fell asleep. Such strength is indeed much stronger than them. This kind of thing, he had to convince. Captain America took 2 deep breaths before returning the topic to the Infinity Stones. Mage Lin Ang, what do you mean when you said earlier that Thanos has already obtained 4 Infinity Stones? In addition to space, power, and mind gems, what gems did he get? Lin Ang sighed lightly, and then said, it's a reality gem. A reality gem is stored with a collector in the realm of knowledge. Do you think that with Thanos' current strength and his character, he will let the collector go? Quote, quote. Silent. Nick Fury, Captain America, Tony Stark and others were all silent. Their faces are very ugly. As Lin Ang said, Thanos will not spare collectors. Thanos is imperative for the Infinity Stones. Even Blue Star, he sent Ebony Throat and others to look for it. The collector there, naturally he will not send people. Now, Thanos' only miscalculation should be that Blue Star has the presence of Lin Ang. The owner of the Time Gem today is not Lin Ang. Then at this moment, I am afraid that the Time Gem will also fall into the hands of Thanos. And while they were silent with this bad news, Lin Ang gave them another hammer. If nothing else, the current situation is that Thanos is likely to get the 5th Infinity Stone. Nick Fury was flabbergasted. He asked with a bit of panic, Sorcerer Lin Ang, how do you say this? Quote. Didn't you just say that he got 4? How come this is 1 more? Quote. There are 6 Infinity Stones. Space, time, power, mind, reality and soul. If Thanos gets 5, doesn't that mean that the last one will be left with the Time Gem in Lin Ang's hand? Lin Ang glanced at the tense people, and then told them very calmly. Actually, Thanos has long known the way to obtain the Soul Gem. And he's already fully prepared. It can even be said that it is that I thought I was ready, so Thanos launched one war after another. Nick Fury frowned. This is definitely not good news for them. But now things are not the worst. Thanos needs 6 gems, the last of which is in Lin's hands. As long as they can protect the Time Gem in Lin Ang's hands, everything is not a night. Tony Stark grasped a little key through Lin Ang's words. That is, Lin Ang seems to know the situation of Thanos today. Mr. Magician, although I don't know where you got the information from. But I guess you know something else, like how he got the Soul Gem or something. Lin looked at Tony Stark. It is worthy of being an Iron Man, his mind is delicate, and he found it so quickly. Lin Ang nodded, indicating that he did know how Thanos obtained the Soul Stone. Suddenly, Nick Fury and the others all looked at Lin Ang with a shocked expression. Lord Lin Angzan, how exactly is he going to obtain the Soul Gem? I think we should be able to take out the Soul Gem in advance. Lin Ang thought for a while, and then said, Gamora, among the Guardians of the Galaxy, is Thanos' adopted daughter. She is the key to Thanos' acquisition of the Soul Gem. When you hear the names Guardians of the Galaxy and Gamora, Captain America and the others were stunned for a moment. What is Guardians of the Galaxy? Who is Gamora? How on earth are they going to find this and the Guardians of the Galaxy and Gamora? And, even if they find them, what should they do? Lock up Thanos' daughter? Captain America asked with a bit of doubt. And before Lin Ang could answer, Nick Fury spoke first. Now is not the time to say that. He frowned, then looked at Lin Ang, and then asked. Lord Lin Angzan, I wonder if the portal used by your magicians can open to the realm of knowledge. I think the most important thing we can do now is to determine if the reality gem has fallen into the hands of Thanos. Seeing Nick Fury say this, Captain America, Iron Man and others also remained silent. Open the portal to the realm of knowledge. If it had been before, he really couldn't have done it. After all, his teleportation can span time, space, and even dimensional and superimposed space. But there is also a premise, that is, he must have been there in advance, or know the exact star location of the place. But now it's different. He took the entire apocalypse. There is a well-established star map in the apocalypse. Under the guidance of the star map, even if it is a place he has not been, as long as he holds the star map, he can still go. Yes. Lin Ang looked at Nick Fury and the Avengers crowd, and then said. All closer. Although Captain America doesn't know what dumb puzzle Nick Fury and Lin Ang are playing, he can probably understand. Lin Ang seemed to have a way to quickly reach the realm of knowledge. He quickly followed the others to Lin Ang's side. Lin Ang's energy wrapped everyone around him, and disappeared into the Avengers base in the blink of an eye. When they reappear, the surrounding environment has changed dramatically. This is the realm of knowledge. The people of the Avengers, looking at the changes in the environment in front of them, couldn't help but marvel. Tony Stark looked at Lin Ang with a bit of doubt, and then asked. This doesn't seem to be the same as the teleportation magic used by Master Wong and Mage Mordo. He also remembered that in the previous battle, when Wong and Mordo opened the teleportation door to send Banner and Nick Fury away, they drew a circular fire ring door. And Lin Ang, he didn't have any preparation at all. Say transmit and transmit. This speed and efficiency are simply hundreds of times that of the teleportation gate. Lin Ang nodded. It's really not a portal of teleportation, it's better to use than that. Quote. And Captain America, who experienced teleportation for the first time, couldn't help but sigh in amazement. It's really convenient for magicians. If only I could do the same. Captain America was extremely envious. This kind of ability, if it is placed on the battlefield and gives the enemy a blow, it is definitely a fatal blow. Hey friends, I said should your attention be on this poor place. Spider-Man Peter Parker pointed ahead of them. As far as the eye can see, the entire realm of knowledge is in ruins, not even a complete building. Peter Parker took 2 steps towards the realm of know-nothing, as if he wanted to go inside and see what was going on. Only, he had just taken 2 steps when he suddenly stopped. Then he turned his head to look at Tony Stark and the others and said, I declare in advance, if an alien jumps on my body and lays eggs on my chest or something, if I end up eating you, I will say sorry to you first. Tony Stark pointed at Peter Parker and said, along the way, I don't want to hear this buzzword about little children. Quote. Peter Parker spread his hands and said, oh, well, what I'm trying to say is, someone is coming. And his voice just fell. A round iron ball gurgled and rolled at the feet of Tony Stark and Captain America. Then the round iron ball exploded instantly. Unguarded, the two were knocked back several steps by the impact of the explosion. Then they saw a huge figure rushing out of the smoke of the explosion. While rushing, he still shouted in his mouth, Thanos. Ah, watch as the man threw a few more things at them in the smoke. Captain America immediately took his shield in his hand. Then they hit back the ball that was flying towards them. The explosion blew the people who rushed over. Batman and Iron Man quickly put on their suits and armor. Captain America held his shield and looked ahead warily. Hawkeye removes the bow and arrow from his back. Nick Fury also pulled out his own weapon. Mela approached Lin Ang, and the water molecules around her continued to condense, ready to attack at any time. At this time, from different directions, several people rushed out, and they launched an attack towards the Avengers. They seemed to be very embarrassed. Almost everyone took them with them, but there was no mercy in attacking them. Inexplicably attacked, the Avengers crowd was not vegetarian, and immediately fought back. Nick Fury pulled Dr. Banner back 2 steps and walked to Lin Ang's side. He felt that in this situation, it was safest to stand with Lin Ang. Roar, there are many people on the other side. Dr. Banner stood beside Lin Ang and looked at the people on the other side. And the guy on the other side seems to look very peculiar. A guy similar to Iron Man, full of high-tech equipment, looks like a human. And others don't look like humans at all. A raccoon armed with a machine gun. A tree man who looks like a tree spirit. And a big guy that has just been counter-blown up. This team should not be composed of aliens from different planets. Dr. Banner whispered. And Lin Ang beside them said. That's what I said before, Guardians of the Galaxy. Quote? Nick Fury was taken aback. Quickly thought of what Lin Ang said before. The key to finding the soul gem is Gamora's Guardians of the Galaxy. Is that if you take them down, you can stop Thanos from getting the soul gem. 337. Nick Fury's whole person was excited. He is about to order the Avengers to capture each other. As a result, I heard the other party shouting loudly. Don't move. Everyone don't move. Calm me down. Nick Fury looked towards the battlefield. I saw that the man on the other side didn't know when he restrained Peter Parker. He held his weapon against Peter Parker's head, as if he would burst Peter Parker's head if they moved at will. And on their side, Tony Stark also restrained a big man on the other side. The man on the opposite side poked Peter Parker's head with a weapon, looking threatening, and asked in a deep voice. I'll ask you, where is Gamora? Gamora. The Avengers crowd was stunned. They didn't get there, and the people on the other side actually came to look for Gamora. Hawkeye frowned slightly. Who are you? Why are you also looking for Gamora? Quote. And Star-Lord heard Hawkeye's words and thought that the Avengers belonged to Thanos, and they were also looking for Gamora. He raised his hand and was about to knock Peter Parker on the head. Let your people release Gamora, or I'll blow your head. Peter Parker looked innocent. It's true that we came to find Gamora, but we haven't seen anyone yet. But Xingju obviously didn't believe it. Lin Ang watched the two sides reach a stalemate and didn't want to waste time here. Sighed, he stepped forward. Okay, let it go, we are friends and not enemies. Saying that, Lin Ang stretched out his hand and pointed in the direction of Star-Lord and Tony's dock. Then used the words to follow, open. Quote. Both Star-Lord and Iron Man involuntarily let go of the hostages. Mage Lin Ang. Seeing Lin Ang's sudden move, Tony's dock couldn't help but frown. The feeling just now was very unpleasant. It doesn't feel like being manipulated, but like acting autonomously. At the moment Lin Ang spoke, only one thought came to his mind, and that was to let go of the hostages. It seems that only this is the right thing to do, and he has to do it. On the other side, Xingju had obviously never seen such a skill. When he let go of Peter Parker, the whole person was dumbfounded. And Peter Parker, at the moment of leaving Star-Lord, a spider silk stuck to the stone wall on Lin Ang's side, and through the pull of the spider silk, he crossed over to Lin Ang's side at an extremely fast speed. Now he understood. The world outside Blue Star is dangerous, and only staying by Lin Ang's side is the most secure. Lin Ang looked at the Avengers people, and then said, they are the Guardians of the Galaxy. I said. Quote. Gamora is their member. Then Lin Ang looked at Star-Lord of the Guardians of the Galaxy. We're from Blue Star, and I think you already know from Thor, about the Avengers. Thor. The Avengers people were obviously stunned for a moment, and they all involuntarily looked at Lin Ang, and then at Dr. Banner. Doesn't it mean that Thor is dead? Tony Stark looked at Dr. Banner. And Banner was also pleasantly surprised. When he left the spaceship, he did think that Thor was dead, but he did not expect that he was still alive. You guys are the group of people Thor mentioned. A little girl in the opposing camp, with a little surprise, looked at the Avengers in front of her. And Nick Fury looked at the little girl in surprise. You know Thor. That proves that Thor really isn't dead. Quote. Xingju nodded, and then said, that's right, the big tall, not very good looking, was saved by us. Quote. Where is he now? Tony Stark asked. He's going to Veneta, looking for dwarves, and crafting a weapon. Tony Stark, nodding with a little surprise, then looked at Lin Ang with a bit of pleading. Lord Lin Angzan, I don't know if I can trouble you again and take us to Nevita. Lin Ang nodded and prepared to take everyone to Nevita instantly. Just before he could make a move, Xingju stepped forward and said. Can we go with you? Thanos captured my girlfriend Gamora. After everyone heard this, Chi-Chi looked at Lin Ang. Now this team seems to be dominated by the Avengers. But in fact, it is Lin Ang who is really in charge. Whether these people from the Guardians of the Galaxy can follow depends on Lin Ang's will. Nick Fury looked at Lin Ang with a bit of eagerness. He also saw the performance of the steel of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Although they cannot be compared with Mela, Wong, Mordo, Ji Yi. But the strength is no worse than Iron Man and Spider-Man. Now that the big war is imminent, the more combat power the better. Lin Ang looked at Xingju and the others, and then nodded. Anyway, a sheep is to drive, and a flock of sheep is also released. There is no difference between taking one person to teleport and taking a group of people to teleport, and it is not impossible to take a few more of them. When Lin Ang took everyone to Nibita instantly, Star-Lord and the other people of the Guardians of the Galaxy couldn't help but glance at each other. For the first time, they experienced the mystery of magic. It's too convenient. Xingju couldn't help but sigh. If they have this ability, then even if they can't beat Thanos and want to escape, I'm afraid Thanos can't stop them. That way, Gamora, too, will not be taken away by Thanos. And everyone in the Guardians of the Galaxy couldn't help but stare at Lin Ang directly. They had never heard of such an ability. Compared to such an ability, the speed of their spacecraft is simply too slow. Hey, bro, I don't think this is the time to lament this matter. Captain America pointed to Nevita in front of him and said, I don't think there will be anyone here. I think we might have taken a step at the end of the day. Although this place is not like the realm of knowledge, it is full of ruins and ruins. But there is no sign of life. Is Thor really here? There's someone over there, Tony Stark, pointing to their left front, said. Everyone hurriedly rushed in that direction. All that was seen was Thor, and a dwarf. What man? Sensing that someone was approaching, Thor immediately entered a combat state, and he looked around warily. Until he saw familiar faces. Steve, Natasha, Tony Stark. Why are you here, still with Star-Lord and them? Thor looked at the group of people in front of him with a bit of shock, not knowing how they got together. A little accident. If it weren't for Mage Lin Ang's help, we wouldn't have been able to get here so quickly. Mage Lin Ang. Thor couldn't help but look at the only two of the two teams he didn't know. Nick Fury quickly stepped forward to introduce him. This is the Supreme Mage of Karma Taj who has been guarding Blue Star, Lord Lin Ang. Thor looked at Lin Ang. He didn't see for a while what was different about Lin Ang. But he could feel that Lin Ang's body seemed to have an extremely huge energy. Such a huge amount of energy, even in the body of God, he has never seen it. Tony Stark asked, Listen to Star-Lord, you came here to craft weapons, I don't know what the situation is now. Quote. Thor sighed helplessly, and then pointed to the dark Veneta. The perennial fire of Veneta has now been extinguished, and it is necessary to restart the furnace fire and awaken the core of the dying heart. Okay, Tony Stark, looking at Thor and asking, so what should we do? Quote. Maybe we should give that big guy a little bit of motivation. Thor pointed to the huge round wheel next to it. Everyone looked in the direction he was pointing and couldn't help but open their mouths. You don't mean to push this huge thing? Peter Parker looked at Thor suspiciously. Thor didn't answer, just nodded. Rocket Raccoon couldn't help but swallow. I think you need to get something bigger to drive him. Thor shook his head. Just take me over and hand it over to me. Quote. The crowd hesitated, and Mela, who was beside Lin Ang, had already drawn a portal in front of him. The place that leads to this is the ring that needs to be induced to light the furnace. Lin Ang turned his head and glanced at Mela. Mela came into contact with his gaze and revealed a perfect smile. I'm looking for the suspense ring that the king wants. I've been fumbling with this portal for a long time. Lin Ang nodded, and then said, You can see it, it's careful. The speed at which the portal opens sometimes represents life and death. Mela's speed as soon as she opened the portal was no worse than Wong and Mordo. I can't tell what it's just learned. Mela, on the other hand, secretly glanced at Lin Ang. She had heard Wong and Mordo mention before that Lin Ang had learned the magic of Karma Taj in just one day, and had also created a lot of esoteric magic that even an ancient mage could not understand. In front of a ghost like Lin Ang, her achievement is not worth mentioning. Thor saw Mela open the teleportation door for him. He nodded his thanks to Mela. Then he strode forward and stepped through the portal of teleportation. Watching him pass through the teleportation gate, everyone's eyes fell on Thor's body. waiting for him to rekindle the furnace. Lin Ang, on the other hand, frowned, and then sighed. I'm afraid I'm going to fail. Hearing him say this, Nick Fury and the others looked nervous. Look there, Lin Ang pointed to a place and then said. The place was stuck with a foreign object, and with the power of the spaceship from which Saul came, it was impossible to pull the ring. So what to do? Tony Stark grimaced, then nodded in his chest. The nano suit wrapped his whole body again, he said. I used to figure out how to get rid of what was stuck there. Lin Ang shook his head. Don't bother so much. Saying that, he casually threw out a magic whip. The magic whip in his hand is completely different from the magic whip in the hands of other mages. As if it could be extended indefinitely, the magic whip was drawn towards the foreign object. The magic whip was like a fire dragon, pumping heavily on the stuck foreign object. Click. The sound of shattering came, and the foreign object of the cylinder ring instantly shattered into countless fasts, and then fell into the void and disappeared. The Avengers people, who already had some understanding of Lin Ang's strength, just marveled at Lin Ang's magical power. And the people of the Guardians of the Galaxy were completely dumbfounded. What did this guy throw out just now? Whip. Why is it so powerful? Xingju couldn't help but doubt life. The power just now, even ordinary high-explosive hot weapons can't do it. How the hell did he do it? Could it be that this person in front of him is not an ordinary person? Xingju looked at Lin Ang with some suspicion. And Peter Parker now seems to have turned pink to Lin Ang. Seeing the Guardians of the Galaxy, these people were so shocked that their jaws almost dropped. He said triumphantly, that's the power of magic. Mage Lin Ang, but Blue Star's most powerful magician now. After speaking, he also mysteriously came to Xingju's side, and then said. This is not the strongest combat power of Mage Lin Ang. You'll know later, Master Lin Ang's powerful skills are many, and this is just a drop in the bucket. Mela stood behind Lin Ang and looked at Lin Ang with a bit of adoration. For the magic whip, she had also seen Wong and Mordo use it when she had fought against Thanos' men before. It's just that the power of the magic whip they used and the power used by Lin Ang could not be compared with it at all. Mela couldn't help but rub her hands, and then secretly said in her heart. It is worthy of Lord Lin Ang, no matter what kind of magic it is, it can reach the pinnacle in his hands. The huge ring was used to rotate under the influence of Thor in the spaceship. The furnace fire that was extinguished by Thanos also has the possibility of burning again. Lin Ang's gaze fell on that core. That core is the secret that keeps the fire of Nevida enduring. This time, you can take a closer look at that core. Actually, rekindling the fire is such a thing. Lin Ang can do it at hand. But he wanted to study the mystery of the fire, so he kept quiet. The star ring began to move slowly. At this time, everyone realized that it was not a ring, but several rings nested together. As the innermost star ring rotates, the entire star ring system seems to have awakened. One pulls the other, slowly unfolding. Before, the core that Thor was referring to also began to emit red-blue fire little by little. Numerous runes began to emerge on the star rings and cores. The planet that was originally dark and full of dead silence seemed to have been re-energized. The whole star seemed to light up in an instant. The Dwarf King, who had been standing quietly with Thor before, looked at the re-burning core, and some hope finally appeared in his eyes. Nice job, boy, he whispered. And the people of the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Avengers couldn't help but widen their eyes a little when they saw the reignited core. This is the real Nevida. They couldn't help but sigh in a low voice. And Lin Ang's gaze was fixed on that core. It's just that the core just started for a moment, and suddenly turned off again. Everyone immediately frowned. They all couldn't help but look at the Dwarf King, seemingly waiting for the Dwarf King's answer. The Dwarf King cursed in a low voice. What happened? Nick Fury asked. The Dwarf King sighed. The machine failed, and the core did not emit enough heat. Quote. With the core off, I don't have enough heat. Thor couldn't help but ask, how long will it take you? Quote. A few minutes, maybe longer. Thor stood up again. I'll go and pull him away. As soon as he said this, everyone was taken aback. They had all seen the heat that erupted from the core just now. Go and pull it away. What is the difference between that and looking for death? You're looking for death. The Dwarf King looked at Thor with heavy eyes. Saul, on the other hand, moved his body and said, "Without that axe, going to Thanos is still looking for death." After saying that, he turned around and went to pull the core. And Lin Ang casually threw out a mantra lasso, tied him up, and then pulled him back. "You." Thor looked at Lin Ang with a bit of incredulity, not knowing why he was doing this. "We will soon go to war with Thanos, you are a big combat power, you can't fold here." This time is different from the original, he doesn't want to drag it out until the end and wait until Thanos hits the door. Since he wants to take the initiative, then naturally there is no time to heal Soul's injuries. But the core, Thor pointed to the huge star ring, a little tangled. Lin Ang glanced at him, and then used the Infinity Doppelganger. Many doppelgangers, like soldiers inspired by the Tao, lined up around the star ring. Subsequently, a kind of doppelganger, she used the power of thought, as well as the ability to follow words. Just for a moment, the star ring turned. The core also burst into hot temperatures again. The flames in the core seem to have life, and they are beating regularly. Lin Ang quietly used the IQ realm. Explore this and that core from different angles and orientations. His heart and eyes seemed to be beating with the beating of those flames. Congratulations, observe the core of Nevita, you have comprehended and created the forbidden spell Eternal Flame. Eternal Fire. A flame that can burn forever, endure for a long time, and burn all things. Lin Ang's eyes narrowed slightly. He quietly summoned a trace of flame at his fingertips. That trace of flame was obviously not very obvious, but it raised the temperature around it several times. The flames flickered slightly on Lin Ang's fingertips, like a heart that kept beating here. Hot, bright, full of hope. The people around felt the change in temperature around them, and they couldn't help but look at Lin Ang. The heat energy of the core over there has not fully risen. Lin Ang's side had already summoned a cluster of flames with heat energy against the sky. Shish, is this also magic? Tony Stark looked at the flame in Lin Ang's hand with a bit of curiosity. He clearly sensed the unusual flames between Lin Ang. He quietly contacted Friday and asked Friday to analyze the flames in Lin Ang's hand. The result of the analysis was that this was an unknown thermal energy, and this presence was beyond the scope of what they could detect. Mela looked at the flame in Lin Ang's hand with a bit of doubt. She could sense it. The cluster of flames in Lin Ang's hand was completely different from the magic blessing prohibition he had imposed on her before, and the control of fire. This flame is hotter and appears to carry life. It gives the feeling that it seems to be able to burn everything. And the Dwarf King next to him, looking at the flame on his fingertips, had an inexplicable sense of familiarity. When he looked closely again, he couldn't help but feel surprised. The flame in Lin Ang's hand was clearly the flame form that they had been burning before. Although the cluster of flames in Lin Ang's hand looked very weak, the heat and energy it emitted were very familiar to him. Originally, the Dwarf King still wanted to say something to Lin Ang. But by this time the core has been ignited, and the whole planet seems to come to life. The metal he had prepared in advance had begun to melt due to the magic props, and everything had reached the vital bottom. The Dwarf King took a deep breath, then just glanced at Lin Ang, and then quickly ran to the side of the furnace and began to forge weapons. And Lin Ang's gaze has been following the movement of the Dwarf King. Watch him forge this weapon like a process. Lin Ang's eyes narrowed slightly. It is said that weapons are being forged, but in fact they are already prepared molds, configured metals. After the metal is smelted, it is injected into the abrasive. Everything seems to have been forged countless times. Lin Ang couldn't help but think. If he also set up such a place at Karmatage. If those magicians can enter the process of learning, will the strength of those guys be improved? As the invaders get stronger, Karmatage's mages are also able to show less and less help. According to his memory, after the invasion of the purple potato essence, Scarlet Witch gradually blackened because of the death of Vision and the influence of the multiverse and other universes, and finally clashed with Doctor Strange, almost destroying the entire Karmatage. If Karmatage's magician is a little stronger, Scarlet Witch is a fart. Lin Ang touched his chin and thought secretly. And at this very time, the Dwarf King suddenly became impatient. Axe handle. Where is the axe handle? The Dwarf King began to look around. And Groot, the tree man who had been following behind Star-Lord and playing with his mobile phone with his head down, walked slowly to the axe. He bent down, his arms transformed into vines, and then wound his axe. The scorching temperature made him unable to help but let out a low moan. But he held back. Looking at Groot's actions, Star-Lord and the others couldn't help but exclaim. Groot. They didn't expect that the internet addict teenagers on weekdays would put down their mobile phones and sacrifice themselves. Groot turned his arm into the handle of an axe. Then he raised his other hand and violently broke his arm, so that the artifact axe was completely formed. And Groot himself, but also greatly injured. The Avengers crowd couldn't help but bring a little admiration and guilt in their eyes when they looked at Groot. Lin Ang's gaze stayed on Groot's body. Groot's broken arm began to recover in a short time. The regeneration of severed limbs, the lost vitality, is also recovering rapidly. Lin Ang knew that this should be the talent advantage of the Flower God Colossus clan. After the axe handle of the Storm Tomahawk fused with the axe, a blue-purple thunderbolt flashed on it. Then the Storm Tomahawk erupted with amazing thunder and lightning power. The surrounding weather also changed suddenly. The clouds were dense, and thunder and lightning flashed in them, as if they would fall at any moment. Thor's hand opened slightly. The Storm Tomahawk trembled on the ground as if it had been pulled by something. Finally flew into Thor's hands. At the moment when the tomahawk flew into his hand, the thunderclouds in the sky trembled, turned into several thunderbolts, and fell from above and fell on his body. The injuries on Thor's body, which were originally beaten by Thanos, healed instantly. An extremely domineering energy spread out around him. Around, the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy were rushed out by this energy almost at the same time. And Lin Ang half squinted at the circle of invisible spreading energy. When Mela couldn't withstand the energy impact and was about to be knocked out, he reached out and pulled her to his side. Lord Lin Ang, Mela said with a little palpitation. Lord Lin Ang, there seems to be a special power on that battle axe, and that power seems to be extremely special. Quote. Lin Ang nodded slightly. The Storm Tomahawk, also known as the King's Weapon, is Asgard's strongest weapon. This weapon is made up of the fusion of 3 artifacts. Odin's sword, ultimate hammer, Iron Bear axe. These 3 weapons, no matter which one they are not ordinary. After Odin's sword penetrated the serpent died, and the power contained in it should not be underestimated. The ultimate hammer is Mjolnir from another universe, and the interior is full of the power of cosmic thunder. As for the last Iron Bear axe, this is Thor's weapon when he was young. First of all, it was originally an artifact, and secondly, it was very strong. The Storm Tomahawk formed by the fusion of these 3 weapons is destined to be extraordinary. The energy of the thunder and lightning burst out in full force. Thor stood in place with his tomahawk in hand, his eyes closed, and he didn't know what he was sensing. And with God Thor as the center, within 10 meters, all were filled with thunder and lightning. The Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy who were blown out looked at Saul, Mela and Lin Ang standing in the thunder and lightning with shocked expressions. Thor is the center of the thunderbolts that erupt from him and spread around him, attracted to him and flickering. And in that circle of thunder and lightning, there is a very calm area. That was the area where Lin and Mela were standing. The power of those thunderbolts seemed to be afraid of something, and did not dare to approach that area at all. These people, looking at the 3 people in the thunder and lightning, Xingju couldn't help but widen his eyes. That huge energy, he couldn't stand up, and there were 3 people over there. One is the guy who caused this energy riot, and the other is the guy who makes that energy fear. As for the woman left, well, she looked as if it was only incidental, because standing by Lin Ang's side, she was not affected. But she is still standing, which also shows that she is not simple. Nick Fury watched the power burst out of Thor's Storm Tomahawk in his hand, and the joy in his eyes was simply not too obvious. Now our win rate has increased by a few points. Tony Starr looked at Lin Angdao. I just want to know now what kind of monster the so-called Supreme Mage is. He looked at Lin Ang's eyes full of complexity. When the energy burst out just now, he immediately put on the nano battle armor, but even then, he was rushed out. Even he was now nearly 100 meters away from the center of the storm. But even so, he was overwhelmed by that huge energy and couldn't stand up. And Lin Ang not only stood in the center of the storm, but also made those energy storms afraid of him and did not dare to approach him. Is this still human? Black Widow took a deep breath, and the look in her eyes towards Lin Ang was a little complicated, like envy, like admiration, and more admiration. Wait, look at Master Lin Ang's body. Little Spider-Man Peter Parker pointed at Lin Ang with a little trembling and exclaimed. The crowd followed where he was pointing. I saw that Lin Ang's feet didn't know when a lightning pattern aperture appeared. It seems that the aperture isolated Thor's thunder and lightning. Captain America Steve looked at the aperture and whispered. Have you noticed that the lines and fluctuations of the aperture under Lin Ang's feet are very similar to Thor's? Everyone couldn't help but look at the aperture at Lin Ang's feet with a little surprise. And Amela standing behind Lin Ang looked at Lin Ang in front of him with a little surprise. Others are far away and may not be able to find out. But she stood by Lin Ang's side. She could clearly feel the changes in Lin Ang's body. The energy fluctuations on Lin Ang's body seemed to be changing little by little. He seemed to be simulating the way that energy in Thor worked. Congratulations, watch the Thunder God Thunder and Lightning Control, you comprehended it, created the forbidden spell Storm Control. Storm Control. Lin Ang lowered his head and clenched his fists in vain. The energy riot originally caused by the surrounding Thunder God stopped in an instant. It was as if everything had been pressed on the pause button at this moment. Thor also woke up from his closed eyes, and he looked at Lin Ang with a little surprise. Just now he was fusing the power of the Storm Tomahawk and mastering the energy it contained. But the Storm Tomahawk is not an ordinary divine weapon after all. According to his original plan, I am afraid that it will take a while for him to officially fuse the power in it and then completely control it. But at that moment, the energy of the Storm Tomahawk seemed to have stalled. It was at that moment that he seized the moment and took the Storm Tomahawk in one fell swoop. Now he is fully able to master the power of the Storm Tomahawk. Although he didn't know how Lin Ang did it, at that moment, it was because of Lin Ang's strength that he could master the Storm Tomahawk so smoothly. Thor looked at Lin Ang's gaze a little more inquiring. To be honest, he hadn't paid much attention to Lin Ang before. Although Nick Fury said that he is a supreme mage and a blue star supreme existence. But he didn't feel the difference in him. But now, he really knew Lin Ang's strength. The people of the Guardians of the Galaxy who flew out by the energy impact, as well as the people of the Avengers, saw that Thor's burst of energy disappeared and returned to them one by one. Spider-Man, Peter Parker walked to Thor's side with a bit of curiosity, crouched on his lap, and looked at the Storm Tomahawk that Thor was carrying in his hand. Wow, that's cool. He reached out and touched the axe. The axe gives people a thick and quaint feeling, and even if you just look at it, you can feel the power contained in it. The others looked at the axe with a bit of a look. Is this axe really capable of dealing with Thanos? Nick Fury looked at Thor, then at the axe in his hand, and then said, Guys, I think since we have already obtained the weapons, then are we going to discuss how to face our unprecedented powerful enemy? The others couldn't help but look solemn. For Thanos' strength, almost everyone present has some understanding. His strength was indeed unprecedented for them. With 5 Infinity Stones, Thanos is already almost invincible. Nick Fury looked at their expressions and then spoke again. His strength is too strong. I propose that we should take the initiative and not put the main battlefield in Blue Star. Blue Star is too vulnerable to attack once they let go of their hands and feet. Then the final result must be Blue Star Burst Ball, all human GG. Lin Ang couldn't help but glance at Nick Fury. Although this guy's strength is not very good, I have to say that this overall view is still good. For Nick Fury's proposal, others naturally have no opinion. Naturally, there is no problem, but I have a question. Tony Stark looked at Nick Fury. How do we go to Thanos to take the initiative? Quote, they don't even know where Thanos is now. What we know now is that Thanos is looking for the Infinity Stones. Aren't we just guarding Master Lin Ang? Captain America pointed at Lin Ang. He felt that since Thanos' purpose was gems, and they had one in their hands, they could wait for Thanos to come and find it. As long as they don't go back to Blue Star, then presumably Thanos won't go to Blue Star. Doesn't it mean that he still has to find the soul gem? Dr. Banner looked at Lin Ang. Mage Lin Ang, I remember you said that Thanos was going to find the soul gem, and Gamora was the key to finding the soul gem. Can we go to the place where we can get the soul gem and wait for them? Star-Lord next to him, hearing Gamora's name, immediately seemed to trigger some switch. He approached the Avengers crowd and asked, "You're going to find Thanos and Gamora. Where are they?" I'm going to get the Gamora." Quote. Lin Ang looked at them and said, "It's been a little long time here, and I don't know if Gamora has obtained the soul gem over there." Lin Ang sighed lightly, and then said, "Although there is no guarantee that it is still time. But go and see it." Lin looked at the lower star map and then found the location of Vomel's star. Then he took everyone and directly teleported to the Vomel star. Vormir star. A wasteland. Thanos took Gamora, standing in a wasteland. He turned his back to Gamora. "It's better that the rough stone is really here, otherwise your sister won't want to live." Quote. Gamora's head was bowed and did not answer his words, her heart filled with despair and sorrow. It didn't take long for the two to walk towards the front. The Red Skull appeared in front of the two. "Welcome, Lord Thanos, son of Arles. Gamora, daughter of Thanos." Thanos looked at the Red Skull in front of him with some doubt. "You know us." The Red Skull smiled lowly, and said in a somewhat gloomy tone, "I am cursed to know all who come here." Thanos narrowed his eyes, not interested in all this. He asked directly what he wanted to know. "Tell me, the soul gem is there." The Red Skull was silent for a moment before speaking. "I think you should know that if you want to get the soul gem, you need to pay a big price." Thanos stepped forward and looked at the Red Skull without dodging. "I'm ready." "Huh." The Red Skull let out a low, hoarse laugh. He said with a bit of mockery, "In the beginning, we thought we were ready. Unfortunately, we were all wrong." Saying that, the Red Skull turned around and walked towards the front in silence. Thanos and Gamora, on the other hand, followed behind him. Thanos watched the Red Skull walk forward without hesitation, and couldn't help but ask, "How did you know so much about this place?" The Red Skull's footsteps stopped slightly, and then said slowly as if he was remembering something. "Before, I also traced the whereabouts of these rough stones. I even caught one myself. Only, it abandoned me, banished me to this place, and cursed me. I will take someone else to hunt for treasure, but I will never get it." The three of them didn't know how long they walked, and when they reached the edge of a cliff, the Red Skull stopped. He stood on the edge of the cliff and said, "You are now not only facing the treasure you were looking for, but also the fear in your heart." Gamora looked at the scene in front of her, and then couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "At what cost?" The Red Skull turned his head to look at Gamora, and then said in a low voice, "The Soul Origin Stone has a high status among the infinite rough stones because of his unique wisdom with the shout." Quote. Thanos asked in a low voice, "Tell me, what does he want?" The Red Skull said in a calm voice, "To make sure the owner understands its power." "Soul Rough Stone." The Red Skull's words paused slightly, and then he said, "He needs your sacrifice." Quote. Sacrifice for what? Thanos looked at him suspiciously. The Red Skull also looked at him, and then said, "In order to get this rough stone, you must lose your beloved, soul for soul." Quote. Thanos looked at the cliff with a bit of incredulity. His expression was a little dull, the corners of his eyes couldn't help but redden, and tears flowed down his cheeks. Standing not far behind him, Gamora laughed softly, and then became maniac. "All my life, I have dreamed of this moment today, and I want to watch you eat your own evil consequences. But I never got my wish, until now. You kill innocents indiscriminately, and you still have a good name for mercy. This is the punishment of the universe for you." Thanos, who had been facing away from Gamora, slowly turned around. When Gamora saw the tears on Thanos' face, she was stunned for a moment. "You're actually in tears." The Red Skull looked at Thanos, then at Gamora, and then said, "He's not shedding tears for himself, he's shedding tears for you." Gamora's sudden panic. She took several steps back, and couldn't help but chant in her mouth, "This is impossible." Thanos sighed in a low voice, "I once escaped my fate. This time, I will never run away, even if it comes at the cost, losing you." Gamora's face changed, and then she shot at herself at a very fast speed, intending to commit suicide. Only, at the moment when her weapon was about to enter her body, the knife in her hand disappeared. Thanos whispered, "I'm sorry, little one." He grabbed Gamora and threw her off the cliff, skewer. Nope. The moment Gamora was left behind, she cried out in despair. Thanos stood on the cliff and watched Gamora fall, leaving tears in his eyes again. Suddenly, there was a huge change in the sky. The originally dead sky appeared dazzling blue light. The strong light made Thanos couldn't help but close his eyes. When he woke up again, in the palm of his hand, an orange-yellow gemstone appeared. Thanos stood up blankly and looked at the soul gem in his hand. His eyes were full of sadness, and he stood there for a long time without moving. And at this very time, a group of people appeared not far from him. It was Lin Ang who brought the people of the Avengers and the people of the Guardians of the Galaxy to the Star of Vormir. Oh, this place is really uncomfortable. The first time it appeared on the planet Vormir, everyone felt dead silence. This planet does not have the slightest breath of life. After teleporting here, Star-Lord saw Thanos first. Purple sweet potato essence. Gamora is there. Quote, Star-Lord wanted to rush towards Thanos, but was stopped by the rocket beside him. Calm down, friend. It's not that they haven't fought Thanos before. But the result of that encounter gave them a hard slap. A few of them combined, not Thanos' opponents at all. If Star-Lord is allowed to rush up like this, he will definitely be killed by Thanos. Thanos glanced at Star-Lord, then fell silent and said nothing. It may also be that he does not feel the need to explain it to him. And Lin Ang looked at the orange-yellow gemstone in his hand. Heart, it seems that Thanos has succeeded. Well, it looks like you've got it. It's a step we've come to, and Gamora has already been sacrificed by you. Although Lin Ang said that it was a pity, his heart did not fluctuate in the slightest. Thanos really played with the boundless magic power of his teammates' sacrifice to the sky. But in this regard, Lin did not care. After all, Gamora's will eventually come back to life. Besides, each piece of the Infinity Stones has a powerful use. He also did not let go. Now that Thanos has collected all these gems, he has saved him from looking for them everywhere. After hearing Lin Ang's words, Xingju's whole person felt bad. His whole body was a little stiff. He looked at Lin Ang in disbelief, and then asked. Gamora, sacrifice. What the hell do you mean by that? Lin Ang glanced at him, and then said very flatly. If you want to get the soul gem, you need to make an exchange, soul for soul. Exchange the soul of your most beloved for a soul gem. Saying that, Lin Ang pointed to the orange-yellow gem in Thanos' hand. Everyone looked towards Thanos. When they saw the Infinity Stones held by Thanos in the palm of their hand, still glowing faintly, everyone couldn't help but gasp. Nick Fury couldn't help but sigh. Hey, are we one step after all? Quote, he felt that there was something wrong with the matter. I also feel a little big-headed. Doesn't that mean that Thanos now has 5 rough stones of space, power, reality, heart and soul in his hands? Tony Stark couldn't help but look at Lin Ang. Now Lin Ang can be said to be the key core of this victory or defeat. Thanos, on the other hand, looked at Lin Ang. He didn't expect that Lin Ang would know so much about this matter. Just as he had long known that there would be such a result. And just when he looked at Lin Ang, he saw the Agamotto eye hanging on Lin Ang's chest, as if he understood something. Then he looked at the Avengers behind him. You are the guardian of that time gem of Blue Star. You are here now. It seems that the Black Tongue strategist and Black Dwarf are dead. Lin Ang did not hide this and nodded. Thanos couldn't help but take a step back. Then he sighed softly. It seems that this day is really a heavy loss. But soon, he couldn't help but sneer. However, his task is also completed. Thanos lowered his head and set the soul gem he had just obtained on his gloves. The huge energy poured in an instant, making his body tremble a little. Then, his gaze looked at Lin Ang coldly. There is no need for you to fight senselessly. Come on, hand over the time gem. And as soon as his words fell, Xingju, who was already unable to hold back, had already rushed up. This person, leave it to me, I must kill him to avenge Gamora. Star-Lord, armed with a gun, rushed to Thanos' side at great speed and shot at Thanos. It's just that Thanos' strength is far beyond his imagination. Before he could shoot, Thanos had already turned around and punched him in the abdomen. With the blessing of the power gem, Thanos' punch directly sent Star-Lord flying out nearly 100 meters. Seeing this, Groot the Tree Man quickly opened his hand, stretched his arm, turned into a vine and wrapped Xingju, picked up Xingju back, and treated his injuries. Lin Ang looked at Groot with some interest. Watch as pink-green spores emerge from him. Those spores condensed by Groot Bjaj fell on Star-Lord's body, and little by little merged into his body, repairing his damaged body. In just a short time, the few ribs that Xingju had broken and the wounds on his body got better little by little. Tree Man Groot is generally not strong in combat, and it can even be said that he is not good at fighting. But his auxiliary ability and healing ability are definitely not comparable to most people. Congratulations, watch the Tree Man Groot use the Flower God Colossus Essence healing talent, you comprehended it, and created a forbidden spell for all things to grow. Lin Ang raised his eyebrows slightly, feeling the ability of all living beings that he had just comprehended. This ability seems to be similar to that of Muji. It allows plants to grow and manipulates flowers and trees. But it is much stronger than Nemu's control. All things grow, so that flowers and trees can grow instantly, grow and attack according to his will. You can manipulate the life of these plants. Under the control of the growth of all things, those plants can be intangible weapons for killing, or they can be magical powers for healing and resurrection. And next to them, Xingju, who had received treatment, finally eased up. He looked at Thanos with a bit of surprise and disbelief. The current Thanos seems to be different from when they fought before. He seems to be very strong now, several times stronger than before. Nick Fury looked at the tough Thanos in front of him and couldn't help but sigh. Thanos really lives up to his name. Fortunately he didn't let him fall to Blue Star, otherwise the punch he hit on Star-Lord just now was enough to make Blue Star Mountain collapse. Now is not the time to lament this. Tony Stark only felt his scalp tingle. The strength of Thanos' punch just now he had estimated almost the same, not something he could resist, even if he was wearing a battle armor. If he was hit by that punch, he would definitely climb down. This Thanos is too strong. Do they really have the ability to defeat him? Tony Stark couldn't help but look towards Lin Ang. I don't know how much their Supreme Mage will have against Thanos. He couldn't help but think in his heart. And at this time, behind Thanos, a huge gray-brown space-time door appeared. Thanos's men walked out of the door one after another. See those subordinates of Thanos. The people of the Guardians of the Galaxy and the people of the Avengers couldn't help but frown. Just one Thanos is already very difficult to deal with, and now there are so many subordinates here. This is trouble. Nick Fury looked at the overwhelming number of people pouring out, only feeling his scalp numb. If nothing else, there are so many people on the other side. Even if the strength of the people on their side is good, it is inevitable that there will be casualties in this fight. Captain America looked at the number of people on the other side, and then at the number of people on his own side, and couldn't help but frown. The number of the other side cannot be described as thousands of troops, and on their side, there are less than 20 people in full fighting. Going to war in such a situation is very unfavorable for them. Thanos glanced at his subordinates who appeared behind him, and then looked at Lin Ang again. Guardian of the Time Gem, give you another chance to choose and hand over the Time Gem. Thanos stretched out his hand towards Lin Ang. It's just that what awaits him is not Lin Ang's Time Gem. It's a huge fireball. Mela, who had been standing behind Lin Ang, looked at Thanos with an unpleasant face. Those who oppose Lord Lin Ang are my enemies. As soon as her words fell, her figure turned, and the wind formed under her feet, holding her up into the sky. Large pieces of water molecules condensed on her side, and majestic energy also burst out from her body. For these guys who invaded Blue Star and were bent on snatching the Time Gem in Lin Ang's hands, Mela had had enough. Seeing that Thanos had so deservedly let Lin Ang take out the Time Gem, she was utterly furious. Lin Ang is her faith, her god, she will never allow it. These people are disrespectful to him. Seeing Mela suddenly rush out, everyone in the Guardians of the Galaxy couldn't help but gasp. Is that beauty crazy? What happened to Xingju just now? Didn't she see it? Quote. Rocket couldn't help but shout out in a low voice. He felt like he was going crazy. Now this situation, visible to the blind, is not suitable for head-to-head confrontation. But the woman, she actually rushed out. Did she not see the situation clearly? On the other side, it was the strength of a Thanos plus several legions. Such a strength is more than enough even in the face of the combat power of the previous planet. On the Avengers side, Captain America Steve and Thor both couldn't help frowning. They couldn't help but be a little worried. Steve looked at Nick Fury. Don't we need to go up and help? Next to them, the other Avengers who had seen Mela's true strength patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry, I think she probably doesn't need us to go up and drag her feet. Quote question mark question mark question mark quote. Steve and Thor both looked at them blankly. I don't understand what they mean by this. Peter Parker smiled at them, then pulled the two of them and whispered. You also know that there is a mind gem in Vision and a time gem in Lin Supreme Mage. Steve and Thor both nodded. Thanos not only sent people to get the Vision mind gem, but also sent two very powerful men down to get the time gem. We have no chance of winning against those two people, and we can basically be said to have been held down and beaten. After speaking, he pointed to Mela flying in the sky, and then said. Then, that beautiful little sister above, she took out a Thanos man herself. Although it is not like Lin Ang Supreme Mage, the shot is instantaneous, but it is also a real fight and defeated Thanos' subordinates without injury. After speaking, Peter Parker sighed deeply and said with a bit of yearning and adoration. So, Thor will forget it, why don't these people go up and drag the beautiful young lady? Quote exclamation mark quote. Steve looked at Mela in the sky with a shocked expression. From the beginning, when he saw Mela, he felt that this woman was too good looking. He never thought that Mela would have such strength. Thor, on the other hand, also looked up at Mela with a bit of surprise. Thanos' subordinates, he has also fought with each other, and most of them have a certain understanding of their strength. The strength of those people should definitely not be underestimated. He really didn't expect that a woman who followed behind everyone and had no sense of existence would actually defeat Thanos' men. After Mela rose into the air, her eyes sharpened, and the water molecules around her began to condense. In the first moment, she used the ability to control water. Deprives a large number of water molecules in a large area of the human body below. Control those water molecules to kill them. Looking at the people behind Thanos, a large number of people fell. The Rocket couldn't help but open his mouth. This was completely beyond his expectations. Originally, he thought that Mela rushed out, at most he could kill someone, and then he was forced back by the other party. But who knows, this beautiful chick not only rushed to the top of the enemy's head, but also slaughtered the opponent's centaurs in pieces. Xingju looked at the situation over there in disbelief. Even the strongest weapon he knew could not cause such a lethal effect in a short period of time. How the hell did she do it? The pupils of Xingju's eyes couldn't help but dilate a little. Doesn't it mean that the strongest on their side is the mage named Lin Ang? Is this beautiful woman who has been following Lin Ang so strong? And Captain America and Thor next to them also widened their eyes. Captain America didn't even see what Mela's abilities really were. He thought Mela's abilities were a bit weird. I don't know what method she used to kill those people instantly. Thor, on the other hand, frowned slightly, and then looked at the amulet necklace that Mela was carrying. Others may not feel it, but he could sense it clearly. A large part of the reason why Mela is so strong is related to the amulet she carries. What's that thing she brought with her? Thor couldn't help but ask. Everyone looked in the direction of Mela's chest, and when they saw the amulet, they couldn't help but look at Lin Ang again. Lin Ang picked the next one slightly, a talisman that is condensed with magic prohibition. Quote. With the ability to improve her strength and increase her control over the elements. Oh, there might be a little bit of other help. Quote. Tony Stark's eyes lit up. Talismans, good things. I don't know if he can get one. Peter Parker asked with a bit of curiosity. What a little help. Lin Ang shrugged his shoulders, and then said nonchalantly. A few magic prohibitions are just magic prohibitions, eternal solidification, dimensional barriers, forbidden demon fields, magic affinity, body enhancement, instant healing, strength increase. As Lin Ang read out one by one, the surrounding group fell silent. This is really a little bit of help. The poor rely on mutation, the rich rely on technology, and the magicians around Lin Ang rely on divine power. He's not raising magicians, he's creating an undefeated killing weapon. They can even imagine it now. Those on the other side, unless several of Thanos' generals strike together, may make Mela a little embarrassed. Only Thanos may be able to hurt her. Chapter 71. Thanos couldn't help but frown as he looked at Mela, who was floating in the sky and massacring his soldiers. I didn't expect that there was such a powerful magician on the Blue Star. Who is she? Thanos looked at the dead Blade General beside him. The dead Blade General frowned, and then said with a bit of hatred in his tone. She's always been with that magician. I guess she killed Ebony Throat and Black Dwarf. Oh, Thanos looked at Mela with a bit of surprise. He felt the strength and power of this Mela, and then found that Mela did not seem to rely entirely on her own strength. She seems to be borrowing some kind of power. And she was able to borrow the source of that power smoothly. It was that amulet on her chest, the necklace. It's just that what exactly is that amulet, and why can it borrow power? And, if he was not mistaken, there seemed to be the ability to improve her control over certain powers, as well as the ability to defend various things. Thanos told his subordinates what he saw. Proxima Nighty couldn't help but frown, and a trace of jealousy and envy appeared in his eyes. Such a baby, I don't know where she got it. I look at this thing, I'm afraid it's already at the same level as the Infinity Gauntlet in Lord Thanos' hand. Thanos' eyes narrowed and he didn't speak. One level is not enough. After all, the Infinity Gauntlet is a cosmic artifact, capable of carrying the Infinity Stones, and can give the owner of the Infinity Gauntlet the power to control 6 rough stones. But the role of that amulet is beyond reproach. If that talisman is removed, then this woman, his strength will be greatly reduced. The Dead Blade General looked at Mela in the air, and then his eyes became a little cold, and he drew his weapon, the Soul Battle Blade. They only had this woman rushing out, presumably because she had such a necklace. I think as long as we solve her, then the others will not be enough. The Dead Blade General took a step forward, and then, as if his eyes narrowed, he held the Soul Blade in his hand and launched an attack towards Mela. His figure disappeared like a ghost, and when he reappeared, he was already behind Mela. Mela sensed that there was something abnormal behind her, and when she turned her head to look, it was too late. A short knife had already stabbed towards her vest. However, just when everyone is secretly bad, a round, almost transparent enchantment opened up at Mela's side. The enchantment looked very weak, as if it could be broken with a poke, but it blocked the Soul Battle Blade in the hands of the Dead Blade General. Phew, it scared me to death, and I almost thought that I was going to be attacked by that guy. Quote. And Captain America Steve was staring at the guy who sneaked up on Mela. He said with a bit of gritted teeth. That's this guy. He dug up Vision's mind gem. Is that him? Tony Stark's eyes narrowed. Captain America nodded. That's right. He is very strong. I am not his opponent. If it is not for their purpose as only the mind gem, I am afraid that at that time, Wanda and I will not be able to escape. Quote. Nick Fury couldn't help but frown. The Dead Blade General is obviously different from the other minions. He should be the same as Ebony Throat and Black Dwarf, and he is Thanos' henchman. No, they can't sit still. Nick Fury looked at Tony Stark, Steve, and Thor. I think it's time for you to strike. The three looked at each other. Tony Stark nodded on his chest, a suit of armor was worn on his body, and he used the launcher to take off and approach in the direction of Mela. After entering range, he fired the laser towards that side. The Dead Blade General noticed his approach and quickly dodged away. At this time, Captain America also held the shield on his back in his hand, and he saw that the Dead Blade General avoided Iron Man's laser attack. He threw out the shield in his hand with his backhand. The shield was like a spinning flying saucer, slashing towards the head of the Dead Blade General. The Dead Blade General raised the Soul Blade in his hand to block the spinning shield, and then knocked the shield away. He looked down at the battlefield. It was found that the other party actually came out 3 more people. He couldn't help but frown. What do these people want to do? Besiege him. The Dead Blade General was furious. If he can't break the membrane enchantment on Mela's body, can't he still stab these guys? Thinking about it, he set his sights on Captain America. He had previously played Captain America when he was at Blue Star. Captain America is no match for him. Of the 3 they attacked that time, the strongest was probably the witch. The Dead Blade General couldn't help but frown, and he looked in the direction of the Avengers. This time, he didn't seem to see the witch on the battlefield. He looked intently at Captain America, making Captain America his primary target now. The Dead Blade General held the Soul Blade in his hand and slashed towards Captain America. Captain America dodged one after another. Steve. Black Widow Natasha yelled at him and threw her shield at him. Captain America reached out to catch the shield, and immediately fought back and forth with the Dead Blade General. But one of them didn't pay attention and was almost stabbed by the soldiers below. Thor looked at the battle, gripped the storm tomahawk, and then triggered the power of thunder, and a large area of thunderclouds converged in the sky. As he waved the tomahawk in his hand, thunder and lightning in the sky began to crackle. The giant axe in his hand slammed into the ground. A large area of thunder net spread towards the periphery in an instant. Take him as the center. All the enemies within 100 meters were shrouded in lightning, but in an instant, they were all split into char and fell to the ground. Nice job. Nick Fury looked at several people on the field and was in a good mood. Although Mela and Saul solved these people, it is nothing to the total number of people. However, for their side, it is an inspiring and morale-boosting thing. Lin Ang glanced at him, then chuckled. Happy. Nick Fury was stunned when he heard this, and for a while he was a little unsure what he meant. Don't worry. Lin Ang took out a few talismans and handed them to him. Make you happier. Nick Fury looked at the thing he handed over, and his mouth couldn't help but open a little. If I wasn't mistaken, Lin Ang's gave him the same amulet as Mela. Nick Fury looked at the amulet in his hand constantly shaking. He was a little speechless for a while. These amulets are different from those issued to Karma Taj. This is the amulet that he believes in researching the most. Those who wear amulets can borrow a part of the dark dimension and the power of the apocalypse divine right through the amulet. This kind of talisman condensed is much more difficult to refine than the previous ones for the mages and the Justice League. He also now only has 7, one of which has already been given to Mela. The remaining 6 were temporarily loaned to Nick Fury. Seeing those amulets, not only Nick Fury was dumbfounded. Even the people of the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy were dumbfounded. The power of the amulet, they have just understood a thing or two. Mela can be so strong, and this thing is obviously inseparable. Nick Fury took the amulet with trembling hands, and then sent the amulet to Black Widow, Hawkeye, Spider-Man, and the remaining 3, and he also stuffed it into Spider-Man's hand. Peter, you are responsible for delivering these 3 amulets to them. Peter carefully held the amulets in the palm of his hand. He looked at Nick Fury with a bit of sparkle in his eyes. Yes, Director Nick Fury. After that, Peter Parker fired Spider-Silk at Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor. The 3 people who were still fighting were suddenly attacked by their own people, and they were obviously stunned. Tony Stark glared at Peter Parker with some dissatisfaction. Boy, what are you doing? Peter Parker shook the necklace in his hand towards him. I'll give you something good. Looking at the necklace in his hand, the 3 of them were obviously stunned, and then a look of ecstasy appeared on their faces. Iron Man, in particular, didn't even need Peter Parker to pull him back. Using thrusters, he flew to Peter Parker's side himself. After knowing the magic of Lin Ang's talisman, he had long been yearning for this amulet. I didn't expect that now I really have the opportunity to bring it to me. Iron Man touches the helmet wrap and brings the necklace to his neck. The moment he put on the necklace, he suddenly felt that his mind suddenly became much clearer, and his vision became extremely clear. Feeling the change in his body, Tony Stark was overjoyed, and then he began to call Friday. Friday, do a scan of my body to check my data. Yes. Checking. In about a minute, Tony Stark heard Friday's voice again. The data is abnormal, and the indicators have exceeded the normal limit. Intelligence rating 6, Strength rating 6, Speed rating 5, Physique rating 5, Warframe defense. Normal people limit average 2. Tony Stark listened to Friday's report and only felt that he was in a state of excitement. In the past, he has also done test assessments. All the values, except for the intellectual thinking and the data of the Warframe are 4 to 6, all other basic data hovers between 2 and 3. And this time the test, his value is not lower than 5. This is a talisman, this is a talisman. Tony Stark couldn't help but bow his head and kiss the amulet, then rearmed his armor and rushed towards the battlefield. This was like a battlefield, and he thoroughly experienced the effect of the amulet. The attacks of some small trash fish will hardly play any role for him, not to mention, they will also be killed by their own attacks. The Dead Blade General slashed at him, physically immune, and directly ignored his damage. This magic is also too powerful. Hey, I already knew I would learn magic. Tony Stark sighed softly. On the other side, after Thor caught the amulet, his body jerked. He looked in Lin Ang's direction with some disbelief. He's not the same as Tony Stark. Tony Stark relies mainly on high technology, so he can't feel the change in energy in his body. But he's different. He has divine power in his body. The moment he held the amulet, he felt it. His affinity for thunder and lightning was rising in a straight line, and the divine power in his body was also filled at an extremely fast speed. He could even feel that he was able to use a trace of the power that belonged to the divine right of the apocalypse. What the amulet brought him was a comprehensive increase. Thor's eyes lit up with excitement. He gulped, and then clenched the storm tomahawk in his hand with both hands, increasing the output of energy. Just in an instant, the tyrannical thunder and lightning almost swept half of the battlefield. It's just a blink of an eye. On the battlefield, Thanos' army was killed and wounded in half. Oh my god, is that talisman so powerful? Quote, Xingju couldn't help but look in Lin Ang's direction. Just the amulet that was taken out casually could be so powerful, so how strong would his own strength be? If it was him, would he be able to avenge Gamora? And the other side of the battlefield, Thanos watched his people die and be injured, and he couldn't help but be furious. Proxima Centauri, Supergiant, you go together. Proxima Knight and Supergiant glanced at the furious Thanos, saluted respectfully, and then rushed to the battlefield. However, they came with the remaining few members of the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy. Here they are. Peter Parker brought the amulet necklace. Hide the necklace well inside your clothes and look at the others around you. And everyone else, too, wore necklaces and jumped to try. Proxima Knight and Supergiant stood in front of the remaining Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy. Serving Lord Thanos for so long, this is the first time I've met someone as interesting as you. The superstar's gaze kept falling on Lin Ang's body, as if he wanted to see through his strength. It's just that Lin Ang just looked at her calmly, not afraid of her gaze. Superstar's eyes narrowed, and he said with a bit of unkindness in his tone. I've never let Lord Thanos down. The time gem in your hand, I want it. She raised her left hand, her index finger straight, and the other fingers naturally bent. She put her index finger at the corner of her eye, with a weird smile on her lips, and looked at Lin Ang without blinking. Lin Ang looked at the supergiant's expression and eyes, and his eyes couldn't help but narrow. Mind control. This seems to be a bit similar to the tricks of Dr. Chaos under Darkseid. But she seems to be more overbearing. It was as if there was something else he wanted to get into his head and explore something. Memory stealing. Lin Ang closed his eyes and felt the spiritual power that invaded his consciousness. It's clear that this isn't the first time Supergiant has done this. She is very familiar with the nerves of the human brain, and can divide the nerves of the human brain into different areas, and then find the memory fragments she needs from these areas, and finally read the memory. Congratulations, watch the memory reading of the Supergiant star, you comprehend it, create the forbidden spell Memory Plunder. At the moment when the Supergiant was about to read Lin Ang's memory, she suddenly felt as if her head had been smashed by a sledgehammer, and her whole head was confused. How is it possible? Superstar couldn't help but take a step back, and she looked at Lin Ang with a bit of incredulity. Her memory reading never failed. Moreover, this time it seems that it is not so simple as failure, she now feels like her head is about to burst. Lin Ang, on the other hand, glanced at her lightly, and then said, Mind control doesn't work for me. Also, your memory reading seems to be quite good. After speaking, Lin Ang looked at her eyes turned dark blue and when he saw Lin Ang's eyes turn blue, a bad premonition appeared in the superstar's heart. She herself is a master of reading memories. Naturally, he knew what Lin Ang was going to do. Only, isn't this ability to read memories? Why would Lin Ang too? Could it be that he, like himself, has the main abilities related to spirit, memory, and soul? It's just that Lin Ang didn't give her a chance to react at all. Memory Plunder has been launched. Finding that the situation was wrong, Proxima Centauri next to the Supergiant star was the first to react. She covered Supergiant's eyes and prevented Supergiant from looking into Lin Ang's eyes. Proxima Centauri's heart produced an indescribable sense of fear. In the moment she covered the eyes of the Supergiant, she felt as if something invisible and intangible had wrapped her whole body. It felt as if she had been stripped naked all over her body and displayed her red stripes to others. The moment he was covered by Proxima Centauri, the Supergiant finally breathed a sigh of relief. She only has 1 year in her mind now, and that is, it's okay. Fortunately, Proxima Centauri reacts quickly and moves quickly. Otherwise, she would really capsize in the gutter this time. It's just that Lin Ang looked at Nick Fury beside him with a smile at this time. Director Nick Fury, I think it's time to start the general attack. There are no strong people under Thanos. Thanos' 5 Obsidian generals, Ebony Throat and Black Dwarf, have been killed. Proxima Nighty and Supergiant are now far away from Thanos, and as long as someone drags them down, they won't be able to reach Thanos' side. And the dead Blade General. He is now being played to death by Mela, Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor. I don't have time to worry about myself. Nick Fury nodded repeatedly, then looked at Black Widow, Hawkeye, Banner, and the Guardians of the Galaxy. Friends, it's time for us to launch a general attack. As soon as he finished speaking, Superstar's eyes narrowed and looked at Nick Fury. You don't want to disturb Lord Thanos. Supergiant uses mind manipulation on Nick Fury. Originally, she thought that she would succeed. But what she didn't expect was that after her mental manipulation fell on his body, it was like caressing his clothes, and there was no effect at all. This situation completely exceeded the expectations of Supergiants. The mental manipulation that has never been missed before, today there are frequent problems. Before failing against Lin Ang, she was still able to comfort herself. That's because Lin Ang, like her, knows something about mind manipulation. But this Nick Fury in front of him is different. He seems to be just an ordinary person. Why is he also able to be immune? Lin Ang looked at her, then shook his head. Curious why it failed, Lin Ang asked her. The supergiant looked at Lin Ang blankly. Right, she wondered. Lin Ang tilted his head slightly, and then said, because there is a problem with your memory. Quote. You don't mind control anymore. Quote exclamation mark quote. Supergiant and Proxima Knight looked at Lin Ang with shocked expressions. How is this possible? Supergiant didn't believe what Lin Ang said at all. Impossible. My strength is still there. Quote. The power is still there, but you have forgotten how to use her. Lin Ang looked at the supergiant with a bit of sympathy. What he had just grasped was memory plunder. As the name suggests, it is to plunder the memory of the other party and take that memory for yourself. Of course, if he controls the effect of the forbidden spell, he can still read the memory silently without letting the other party lose his memory or confuse his memory. It's just that this supergiant is an enemy, and being kind to the enemy is cruel to himself. Previously, when he looked at the supergiant, although Proxima Centauri covered her eyes at a very fast speed, he still plundered some of her memories, causing confusion and deviations in her memories. And this part of the memory is about mental manipulation. In other words, this supergiant star in front of her has lost her strongest combat ability. Superstar's whole person was dumbfounded. She looked at Lin Ang in disbelief. No, no way. Quote, Supergiant shouted with a bit of reluctance and anger. She constantly tries to use her powers. Constantly trying to manipulate other people. But the end result was. Her memory seems to be biased. Obviously she still has energy in her body, but her mental manipulation just doesn't work. And Proxima Centauri, the knight next to the supergiant, was also shocked into a cold sweat. She looked at Lin Ang with a bit of incredulity. She had noticed Lin Ang before. It's just that at that time, he has been standing here quietly, like a foil for others. But I didn't expect that this guy was so terrifying. At this time, Nick Fury suddenly found that he was so close to danger just now. He touched his chest with some distraction, making sure he was still alive. Then he breathed a big sigh of relief and looked at Lin Ang Dao. It's still Master Lin Ang who is powerful, and their tricks are vulnerable in front of you. Hawkeye and Black Widow also had something more in their eyes when they looked at Lin Ang. Hawkeye even felt that it would be good if he could get to know Lin Ang earlier. If that's the case, before Loki came to Blue Star, he couldn't make any waves at all. And Nick Fury's words just fell, Proxima Centauri in the dark drink. Snorted. Then he raised the magic gun in his hand and stabbed towards Nick Fury, 0. Although Nick Fury has good skills, in front of the universe fighting master, Proxima Knight, who is the best at hand-to-hand combat, his skills are simply negligible. Lin Ang looked at the magic gun in Proxima Knight's hand and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Is that the weapon that Thanos specially created for her? According to the original book, it seems that as long as the weapon is thrown, it will split into 3 black rays that can track the target, but any creature it touches will die on the spot. I don't know if this is true or not. Seeing that the magic gun was about to pierce Nick Fury's body, Lin Ang threw out a lasso of truth, rolled around the opponent's waist, and then pulled it violently, pulling the person aside. Proxima Knight's spear plunged directly into the ground. Nick Fury looked at the deep hole that was pierced out of the ground, and couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Just now, fortunately, Lin Ang pulled him, otherwise he would have been pierced now. Blue Star Magician, do you really want to go against Lord Thanos? Proxima Knight's tone was full of coldness. She said with a bit of pride and disdain. You don't know anything about Lord Thanos' strength. Lord Thanos has 5 rough stones, each of which can give the user omnipotent control in some way. And now Lord Thanos has the power, space, heart, soul and 5 rough stones of reality. You shouldn't think that if you have the time gem in your hand, you can turn things around. Proxima Centauri looked at the battlefield behind him with a bit of sarcasm. Then she said coldly, don't look at you guys seem to have the upper hand now, but as long as Lord Thanos makes a move, you have 1 to count, and you can't run. Lin Ang was full of carelessness about her words. Thanos' strength is indeed very strong. The power of those 5 rough stones is indeed very strong, but it is not impossible to solve him. Thanos is indeed strong, but we are not weak either. Black Widow suddenly rushed up and attacked Proxima Knight. Both of them are people who are good at hand-to-hand combat, and for a while the two were a little difficult to separate. And Hawkeye put up the bow and arrow, and he aimed at the dead Blade General who was already at the end of the strong crossbow in the distance. As soon as his fingers loosened, the arrow broke through the air, straight into the heart of the dead Blade General. Because of the talisman given by Lin Ang, the speed, power, and energy power of that arrow were far beyond the past. That arrow directly submerged into the body of the dead Blade General, and then exploded violently. The dead Blade General could not even let out a scream before he was blown to pieces. After seeing this scene, Proxima Centauri went crazy. She ate Black Widow's trick hard, and pounced on Hawkeye regardless, as if she wanted to kill Hawkeye. Seeing Proxima Knight go crazy, Nick Fury frowned. What's going on? Why did she suddenly become fierce? Although Proxima Centauri and Supergiant were also talking ruthlessly before, they were not so desperate. Just now, when the Supergiant memory Belingan plundered, I didn't see Proxima Centauri go crazy. Lin Ang glanced in the direction of Mela. The dead Blade General over there had long been torn apart, tied into countless pieces, and fell from the air. You killed someone's husband, can people not look for you desperately? In the original book, after Vision died, Scarlet Witch also blackened and stormed away. If she didn't stop herself in the end, Strange was afraid that it would be costly. But the dead Blade General. Lin Ang looked at the soul battle blade that fell to the ground. The dead Blade General resides his soul on his blade. As long as this soul blade is not destroyed, then he can continue to be resurrected. Although he now seems dead and cannot die anymore, he can be resurrected. Lin Ang thought for a while, then flipped his wrist and used the lasso of the mantra to roll the soul battle blade back. After seeing Lin Ang's movements, Proxima Centauri was noticeably more flustered. She knows much better than others what her lover is capable of. That soul battle blade can be said to be the essence of the dead Blade General. The soul battle blade must not fall into the hands of others. Especially not in the hands of the guardians of that time gem. She wanted to grab the soul blade. It's just that she took a step. At the moment when the soul battle blade started, Lin Ang used material decomposition. That soul battle blade, which should have been indestructible, instantly turned into nothingness. Looking at the dissipated soul battle blade, Proxima Centauri's face instantly became gloomy. This is a little different from the previous madness. Although she was angry and mad before, it was more about venting. And now, her calmness and silence are the beginning of the outbreak. In the distance, Thanos' eyes widened sharply. A wave of anger burned in his heart. In a short period of time, he lost too much. His beloved daughter Gamora. Confidant General Ebony Throat, Black Dwarf. Now even the dead Blade General is dead. His gaze fell on Mela in the air, and then he turned his head in the direction of the Avengers. You guys. Everything around us began to change, and the environment and space seemed to be distorted. On the battlefield, Many people stopped and looked at the changes around them with some hesitation. OMG, what is this? Peter Parker looked at the changes happening around him with an incredulous expression. Could it be that this guy is also a mage? Peter Parker's eyes were filled with disbelief. It's not magic. Mella's face became slightly solemn. Then she fell from the air and looked at Thanos in the distance with a bit of vigilance. This should be the power of those gems in his hand. Thor's face also became heavy, but soon a monstrous hatred appeared under his eyes. No matter what, he must kill Thanos. This is something he has to do no matter what. The hatred of all people in Adagas must be rewarded. Thor clenched the storm tomahawk in his hand with both hands. Wait, where did Thanos go? Tony Stark suddenly noticed that Thanos had disappeared from where he had just been. That's the power of space gems. Thor's eyes sank a little. Space gems allow the owner to change the shape of space and allow them to travel back and forth in any space. Thanos should have left with this ability. It's just that he's going there the hell. What to do? That's what he doesn't know. On the battlefield, Thanos' sudden disappearance overwhelmed everyone. Nick Fury frowned even more worriedly, for fear that this Thanos would not be able to open it, and ran to Blue Star to destroy. What is the situation of this Thanos? How to say that it disappears and disappears? Escape. Xingju couldn't help but scold. All are already ready to start a general offensive, and as a result, their targets are missing. Is there anything more than that? Could it be that Thanos ran away? The Rocket looked at Supergiant and Proxima Centauri. Supergiant is now completely wasted, her mind control ability is no longer effective, and memory reading can only detect intelligence. She is now the equivalent of a real-time announcer on the battlefield. You can share and synchronize some of the things you have detected with Thanos and Proxima Knight. And Proxima Centauri, now too calm. Now she is like a hunter waiting for her prey to leak a flaw, and then kill with one hit. Run, Lin Ang chuckled, and a huge immortal shield appeared behind him. Thanos didn't know when it appeared behind him. His fist stabbed straight towards Lin Ang's back. But it was blocked by the immortal shield. Thanos did run from where he was just now. However, instead of running away, he ran to kill himself and seize the time gem. After Thanos missed the blow, he did not continue to attack. He looked at Lin Ang with a bit of a look. The punch just now made him discover a problem. That is, the immortal shield that Lin Ang cast, he couldn't even break. At this time, he was a little surprised. This guardian of the time gem from Blue Star turned out to be much stronger than he thought. He looked at Lin Ang, and then said in a deep voice. You're not like them. Thanos said in a deep voice, I think you should understand why I did this. Quote. Lin Ang naturally knew his purpose for doing this. It is nothing more than limited resources, overpopulation and, ultimately, insufficient allocation of resources, which can lead to destruction. So he had to strike first and kill half of the people. Thanos didn't care if Lin Ang answered or not, and then he said. Do you know where this is? He looked at his surroundings with a bit of nostalgia. The surrounding battlefield is no longer what it was at the beginning. Lin Ang glanced around, and then said, your original hometown looks. Quote. Thanos nodded. That's right, it was originally a rich and beautiful place. Quote. But he, like other planets, has a large population explosion and limited resources, and just when the planet was about to become extinct, I found a solution to the problem. Nick Fury next to him frowned slightly, he had a premonition. Thanos said that the solution to the problem didn't seem to be a good one. Genocide. Lin Ang lightly spit out 4 words. And these 4 words made Black Widow, Hawkeye, and everyone in the Guardians of the Galaxy gasp. Genocide. Could it be that this Thanos not only wiped out half of the population of other planets, but he didn't even let go of the people of his own planet? Isn't that too frustrating? They couldn't help but stare at Thanos. And Thanos didn't seem to have any emotions, and he talked about his past very indifferently. You're right, it's genocide. However, this massacre is completely random and there is no emotion mixed in with it. Regardless of nobility, status and status, all are treated equally. Thanos suddenly couldn't help but laugh at this time. They all said I was crazy, but the real situation, exactly as I expected, everything went to ruin. Lin Ang did not answer his words. He could almost guess what Thanos wanted to say after he arrived. Perhaps in the beginning, Thanos wanted to rob him of the time gem. But after his punch on the immortal shield, he changed his strategy. Thanos looked at Lin Ang and said, "I just survived." When his words fell, Lin Ang did not speak, and director Nick Fury next to Lin Ang couldn't help it. "So you're going to murder countless lives on other planets?" Nick Fury was already a little angry at this time. Thanos said it nicely, isn't he still a murderous butcher in the end? And Thanos completely ignored director Nick Fury, his eyes kept looking at Lin Ang. "I need the time gem in your hand. If there are 6 Infinity Stones in hand, I only need to snap my fingers, and those people can disappear in ignorance. This is my greatest mercy. Benevolent, to hell with mercy." The people around couldn't help but curse secretly in their hearts. Indeed, too many people and insufficient allocation of resources will indeed overconsume the planet and eventually die. But because of this, genocide was carried out directly. It's just crazy. This merciful ghost. Humanity is gone. Quote. In the Guardians of the Galaxy, the big alien couldn't help but stare at Thanos with round eyes. His eyes were filled with hatred. "It's not you who died, it's not your relatives, you naturally won't feel sad. Thanos, why don't you die?" Quote. He desperately wanted to rush up and give Thanos 2 blows. And Star-Lord next to him, staring at Thanos, his eyes were also full of hatred. Gamora, too, died because of him. Thanos, full of mercy and righteousness, can do things that exterminate humanity. Lin Ang smiled at him and then said, "It's a pity that I'm not as kind as you." Thanos was stunned, not understanding what he meant. "Time gem, I won't give it to you." And at the moment when his words fell, Lin Ang's eyes instantly turned dark blue. Thanos' past memories emerged in his mind like a movie. In the early years, some of the things Thanos went through, his abilities, and his wishes. One by one, they came to Lin Ang's mind. Seeing the color of Lin Ang's eyes change, Supergiant and Proxima Knight both couldn't help but scream badly. Not long ago, the Supergiant star was pitted by Lin Ang's hand. Unexpectedly, this time he used this trick on Thanos. Supergiant and Proxima Knight looked at each other, then nodded to each other. One of them attacked towards Lin Ang, and the other towards Thanos' eyes. Proxima Knight kicked a knee towards Lin Ang's chest. Lin Ang turned to look at her. Proxima Nighttime only felt that his mind was blank for a moment. By the time she reacted again, Lin Ang had already reached out to block her attack. Her knee joint was squeezed by Lin Ang in her hand. Only a click was heard, and the bones broke. The severe pain made Proxima Centauri tremble in the dark night. On the other side, Supergiant has also covered Thanos' eyes. Congratulations, plundering Thanos' memory, observing the eternal philosophy, you have comprehended it, and created the philosophy of the forbidden god. God's philosophy. Lin Ang raised his eyebrows slightly, and then felt the effect of this ability. This ability can infinitely improve mental power, when using this ability. It seems that the existence, change, essence and so on of all things in the world will automatically appear in his mind. Just like only what he doesn't want to know, nothing he can't know. As long as he thinks, his mind moves, he can know everything. Congratulations, plundering Thanos' memory, observing the death curse, you comprehended it, and created the forbidden curse life and death vortex. Comprehending this ability, Lin Ang was stunned. This is an ability comprehended through the curse of the goddess of death. The vortex of life and death is capable of creating a 50-foot vortex. In the whirlpool, everything that has life and death are controlled by him. Reverse life and death, can take away life, and can also give life. This ability, on the battlefield, can be said to be a Qing soldier divine skill. Proxima Centauri was pinched and broken by Lin Angsheng, supported the ground with both hands, a backflip, landed in the distance, and looked at Lin Ang with a bit of vigilance and hatred. On the other side, Thanos looked a little sluggish. At the beginning, he was just attracted by Lin Ang's eyes and couldn't help but look at Lin Ang's eyes. When he found that something was wrong, he immediately used his spiritual power to isolate Lin Ang's memory plunder. It's just that he finally took a step, and his memory was confused. The subsequent collision of spiritual power made him suffer even more. He only felt that his brain was chaotic now, and his brain was painful, as if there were countless small insects that were tearing and biting his brain pulp. Looking at just a face, Thanos and his men were hit hard. Xingju and the others couldn't help but look at Lin Ang in surprise. although Nick Fury and others have always respected Lin Ang very much before. They heard that Lin Ang was very strong, but he hardly did anything along the way. For his strength, they all put a question mark in their hearts. Unexpectedly, if he didn't make a move, he was amazing. Just a face, the other party was almost destroyed by the group. And how did Hawkeye and Black Widow look at Thanos and Supergiant on the opposite side with a bit of attention? They couldn't help but rub their hands excitedly now. The ability that Lin Ang used before directly made Supergiant forget how to perform mental manipulation. I don't know what kind of impact Lin Ang will have on Thanos this time when he uses this ability against Thanos. Does Thanos have amnesia? Will he forget how to use the Infinity Gauntlet? Will he forget what he wants to do? Will the genocide be simply abandoned? If it weren't for the fact that the situation wasn't right now, they would have laughed excitedly. In the distance, several people from the soldiers under Ching Thanos, after discovering Thanos's figure, also rushed to everyone's side. Tony Stark looked at Thanos, who seemed to be stupid, and then asked Hawkeye next to him with a little curiosity. "What's wrong with this big guy?" Hawkeye shook his head. To be honest, he didn't know what kind of ability Lin Ang was. However, what he can be sure of is that it is true that Thanos' current situation is definitely uncomfortable. Hee, I think this battle seems to be over. Peter Parker tilted his head to look at Thanos, Proxima Knight, and Supergiant. Now on Thanos' side, there are only some trash fish left in addition to the three of them residual blood, and it is not difficult to deal with. Thanos, he won't be stupid. Dr. Banner stared into Thanos' eyes for a long moment. Looking at the other party's dumbfounded look, he couldn't help but ask. The others couldn't help but look at each other. It was the first time they had encountered this situation in battle. It's just that how did Lin Ang do it just now? Peter Parker tentatively approached Thanos, but before he could get closer, Lin pressed on his shoulder. He's not stupid, just some memory confusion, don't go near him. As soon as Lin Ang's words fell, Thanos suddenly let out a roar, raised his fist sharply, and then slammed down towards the ground. Suddenly, the ground cracked deep and cracked like a spider's web. He looked at Lin Ang with a little red eyes. Then he roared with some anger and shock in his voice. "What the hell did you do to me?" Thanos was terrified. Just now, Lin Ang just glanced at him, but there were problems with his memory, thoughts, and even the energy operation in his body. And the most terrifying thing is that he can't control the endless gloves. The gloves were obviously on his hands, but he just couldn't control the endless gauntlets and mobilize the power of those 5 Infinity Stones. Memory plunder. Thanos' strength is much stronger than that of supergiants, and the people he comes into contact with are also very special in strength and strength. So much so that after Lin Ang found these memories of him, Thanos didn't have much memory of the use of his power. Then Lin Ang half squinted at the Infinity Gauntlet in Thanos' hand. He is not interested in engaging in cosmic family planning with snapping his fingers. But for the Infinity Stones, he still has some interest. Previously, he wanted to improve the strength of Karmataja's mages and engage in a semi-automated process that could be streamlined and improved. If these Infinity Stones were there, it would be much more convenient. The effect of building a magic array from space, reality, time, heart, soul, and power gems to form something similar to a trial tower is bound to be extraordinary. Thinking of this, Lin Ang looked at Thanos. Then chuckled. "Thanos, hand over the 5 rough stones. Just hand over 5 rough stones and you can leave with your men." As soon as Lin Ang's words fell, Nick Fury's heart jerked up. Would a dangerous existence like Thanos really hand over the Infinity Stones willingly? You don't think about it. Saying that, Thanos planned to attack Lin Ang. And Lin Ang snorted softly, and his feet lightly touched the ground. A huge black and white vortex appeared under his feet and then spread outward at an extremely fast speed. The range shrouded by the vortex, everything turned black and white. Death. Lin Ang simply spit out a word. The black and white vortex below suddenly transformed into pure black. The black vortex surrounded Thanos, Proxima Knight, and Supergiant almost instantly. One after another, black, pitch black power like a shot came out of the ground, tearing the bodies and souls of the 3 people. Thanos, Proxima Knight, and Supergiant desperately want to resist. But in front of those black tentacles, they had no resistance. Those black powers, invisible and faceless, can obviously surround them, but once they touch, they will immediately dissipate and then regroup. Thanos, Proxima Knight, and Supergiant were shocked. It's just a pity that everything is too late. Before the three could respond, their lives had been taken away by the vortex of life and death. The people of the Avengers, as well as the people of the Guardians of the Galaxy, couldn't help but look at each other. What just happened? Who are they? Where are they? What are they going to do here? Thanos, he's dead. Peter Parker couldn't help but ask in a low voice. His voice was full of uncertainty, even a little bit of doubt. Xingju next to him was also at a loss. Is this changing too quickly? Didn't it say before that there was no storm tomahawk to make Thanos undead? But in the end, Thor seems to have taken that axe to clear the soldiers. Thanos seems to be. It seems that their magician killed it alone. Good guy. If he hadn't been beaten by Thanos before, he couldn't believe that Thanos really had the strength to destroy the world. He was killed too easily. Is this the end of it? Nick Fury also felt a little dazed. Things were settled too quickly, and he felt a little unreal. Captain America Steve and Iron Man Tony Stark looked at each other. Their eyes also showed a little bit of uncertainty. Thanos' strength, they somewhat understand. Logically speaking, when they were playing Loki before, they were all embarrassed like dogs. Now in the face of Thanos, it should be easy not to go there, and even be prepared to die. But now, Lin Ang was alone and directly overturned Thanos and his men. Of Thanos' 5 men, 4 can be considered dead in his hands, as well as Thanos. This big brother is 2. Originally they all thought that he would directly wipe out half of Blue Star's population. Outcome: Thanos was directly given a second by Lin Ang's move. This thing is a bit fake no matter how you look at it. And next to Thor, looking at Thanos who had fallen to the ground with a surprised face, he couldn't react for a while. He was even a little unsure whether this Thanos in front of him was really Thanos. The Thanos he remembered was almost invincible. So many people in Adgas are almost defenseless when facing Thanos and his men. But now, Thor didn't quite believe what he saw. Are you sure this is the real Thanos? Could it be an illusion? Quote. At this moment, Star-Lord walked in front of everyone in the Avengers, and he looked around warily. Thanos had acted and teased them once before. That time, Thanos took Gamora. Who knows if this time is real? Are you doubting Lord Lin Ang's strength? Mela glanced at Xingju lightly. Her eyes were all there. If you dare to say yes, the old lady will kill you, threatened. And the remnants of Thanos on the battlefield looked at Lin Ang and Thanos who fell to the ground and couldn't get up. Little did they know that things would turn out the way they are. Will Lord Thanos actually lose? Those guys from Blue Star, are they so strong? For a while, they all panicked. They don't dare to stay here. One by one, they quickly scattered, in different directions, scattering and fleeing. The Avengers crowd looked at them. And then none moved. This is Warmir Star, not Blue Star. There is no life on this planet, and even if those guys scatter, they can't toss anything. I said, can we go back? Tony Stark looked at the others. Before he came, he was making out with his girlfriend. Suddenly he was caught as a coolie, and if he didn't go back to coax him, he was afraid that he would be in trouble. Others also felt it was time to go back. Lin Ang nodded, then walked over to Thanos and removed the Infinity Gauntlet. Then the substance is used to decompose the gloves and put away the few gems. After seeing Lin Ang's action, Captain America stepped forward. He seemed to want to say something. Nick Fury next to him stopped him behind him. Steve, Nick Fury shook his head at Captain America. Captain America said with a frown and disapproval. Nick Fury, those gems are not ordinary things. That's something that can bring destruction, it's extremely dangerous. Steve looked at Lin Ang with a bit of vigilance. When Lin Ang didn't use the Infinity Stones, he was already terrifyingly strong. If he was holding 6 Infinity Stones, his danger index was too high. Nick Fury nodded, then said, it's because these things are so dangerous that an even more dangerous person is needed to look at them. He sighed softly, then asked, everyone already knows the power of these 6 gems, if we bring them back, can we keep them? The power of these 6 gemstones has only been targeted by many people with intentions. Even if they bring them back to S.H.I.E.L.D., there is no way to hold them, and they may even cause trouble. It's better to let Lin Ang bring them back to Karma Taj. Karma-Taj guarded this piece of rough stone, and guarding 6 rough stones is also guarding. What's more, Karma-Taj still has so many mysterious and powerful mages. The strength of Lin Ang and Mela is obvious to everyone. The former supreme mage Ji Yuyi is also one of the best in strength. There is also the strength that Wang and Mordo showed when facing the Ebony Throat before. Their strength should not be underestimated. Nick Fury felt that no matter what aspect he thought about, he felt that these 6 gems were safer in Lin Ang's hands. Captain America frowned, but wasn't saying anything either. Only at this time, Lin Ang suddenly raised his head and looked in one direction. When they found him, everyone looked in the direction he looked. Then they saw a woman in a black head. Under the hood, a half-white skeleton face was revealed. Look at the woman. Lin Ang couldn't help but stand up slowly. When he looked at the other party was also looking at him. Although the other party's face was just a skeleton face, he clearly felt it from above. She was laughing. It's just that her smile is very malicious. Give me back his soul. She obviously didn't open her mouth, but everyone present heard her voice. Tony Stark looked at the guy with some hesitation, and then whispered. This is also Thanos' men. It doesn't look like a living creature. Quote. When did she just appear, and why didn't I just see her appear? Hawkeye wrinkled and looked at the guy. And Star-Lord was already shouting that the people around him were ready to fight. They all put on a fighting posture. Whatever she is, what she is. Quote. She came for Thanos, not a companion, that is, an enemy. First come to a strong attack, catch people, and then talk about the rest of the matter. Lin Ang looked at the skeleton man on the opposite side, and a person appeared in his mind. Goddess of Death. However, this goddess of death is not the god of thunder and his sister Hela, but the goddess of death, one of the 5 creation gods. The multiverse is made up of countless parallel universes and dimensions. There are countless creatures in every universe and every dimension, forming an endless world, and all of this stems from the 5 Marvel creation gods. This goddess of death refers to the death of one of the 5 creation gods. The goddess of death rules over all life and soul in the universe. She is the master of life. It's just that she is more obsessed with death. In the multiverse, the life, death, and souls of all living beings belong to her. Lin Ang's eyes narrowed, and then he thought of the life and death vortex he had learned through Thanos' memories. The source of this ability is the ability of the goddess of death. It can deprive life, it can inject and upgrade, it can condense the soul and annihilate the soul. The goddess of death in front of her is likely to come to the door because of this. After all, in the entire multiverse, souls belong to the goddess of death. And the life and death vortex he used put away the souls of Thanos and Supergiant and Proxima Knight. Star-Lord was the first to rush forward, but the other party only raised his hand a little. Be careful. As soon as the rocket's reminder exited, Star-Lord fainted to the ground, not knowing whether he was dead or alive. Groot the Tree Man stretched his arm and tried to pull Star-Lord back. But the other party just glanced at him. His arm was like a withered rattan, hanging down, and his whole Tree Man looked a lot darker, as if he had lost his life. Everyone around immediately became nervous. The people of the Guardians of the Galaxy and the people of the Avengers couldn't help but get nervous. The skeleton woman in front of her seems to be more powerful than Thanos. This friend, who the hell are you? Why be at our enemy? Quote. The skeleton woman on the opposite side snorted softly and glanced at them with some disdain. As if again, what kind of thing are you who deserve to talk to me? She looked at Lin Ang coldly and spit out 3 words, hand it over. Quote. Lin Ang looked at her and slowly spit out 4 words, what do you want his soul for? Raised to play. Quote. I heard that your relationship is a little different, is it possible that there is no lingering love? As Lin Ang's 2 words came out, everyone was stunned, including the goddess of death. Her eyes narrowed slightly, revealing a cold light with icy killing intent. The people around Lin Ang asked with a puzzled look. Who the hell is this? Lin Ang glanced at the curious people around him, and then spit out 4 words. Goddess of death. Hearing these 4 words, everyone was stunned for a moment, and then they subconsciously turned their heads to look at Thor, the god of thunder. Thor was also stunned, but soon he shook his head. That's not right. She's not Hela. Lin Ang said. I didn't say that she is Hela, she is the god of death, one of the 5 creation gods. Shish. 5 creation gods. Make no mistake. Why is such a presence here? And what Lin Ang just meant. What else is the relationship between this goddess of death and Thanos? Then will she shoot at them for Thanos? If they make a move, then can they resist it? Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but look at Lin Ang. It seemed that he was asking Lin Ang with his eyes if he could her. If we can't do it, can we run away? Lin Ang ignored the eyes of these people, and just looked at the goddess of death, wanting to see if he could study something from her body. This is the 5 creation gods, and they indirectly made a life and death vortex through Thanos, which is simply wasteful. When the goddess of death saw Lin Ang silent, she snorted coldly, and said in a cold tone, "Soul." Quote. She looked at Lin Ang coldly. "You can kill him, but you can't destroy his soul. Give me back his soul as well as Supergiant and Proxima Knight." Lin Ang looked at her and raised her eyebrows slightly. "You're so confident." Saying that, Lin Ang released the souls of Thanos, Supergiant, and Proxima Knight. Then, a trace of all-powerful divine power appeared between him. At that moment of great all-powerful divine power, he touched the souls of Thanos, Supergiant, and Proxima Centauri. Their souls turned into nothingness. Seeing this, the goddess of death suddenly erupted with huge energy. The surrounding temperature instantly decreases. The originally barren and lifeless Warmir star looks even more barren. Black Widow rubbed her arm. At this moment, she seemed to feel that everything around her became gloomy, as if she was the only living person left in the entire world. She couldn't help but look at the people around her, and found that the others also seemed to frown, feeling that something was not quite right around her. Captain America couldn't help but look at Lin Ang, and then whispered, "I don't think you need to provoke her. She is the goddess of death after all." Lin Ang just glanced at Captain America lightly, and then did not speak. He didn't explain his secret hobbies to others. This goddess of death is indeed here for some reasons for Thanos, but more importantly, he learns the vortex of life and death, which brings a sense of crisis to the goddess of death. Although she does not exist in all universes, her existence is absolute and unique. Now there is someone with similar abilities to her. And this person so coincidentally pinched Thanos' soul. This is definitely a threat to her. You pay for the choices you make. The icy voice of the goddess of death appeared in everyone's ears. The black fog rose little by little, filling the entire Vormir star. The trash fish under Thanos, who had just escaped before, died quietly one by one. Lin Ang half squinted his eyes, looking at those black fogs. Those black fogs are like tarsal maggots. As long as they are contaminated with a little, they will spread out immediately. But whenever you touch those black fogs, you will be shrouded in death, feel your body being eroded, and then die a little bit of pain. Watch those black fogs continue to spread. A little closer. The Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy felt that they were breathing a little. They looked at the black fog with trepidation. Thor, the god of thunder, frowned. He looked at the black fog, and grabbed the storm tomahawk in his hand. He stepped forward and drank loudly, then mobilized all the energy in his body to converge on the axe, and then triggered the heavenly thunder and slashed towards the black mist that was constantly approaching them. With amazing momentum and shocking effect, this axe slashed into the black mist. The black mist trembled, and it seemed that a gap had been split in the middle. But soon, that gap closed again. It then spreads around at a faster speed than before. This is a forbidden area of life, and all living beings and energies stained with black mist will be assimilated into dead chi. Thor looked at the black fog with a solemn expression. Just now, he used his divine power to slash at the black mist, but as a result, his energy was assimilated, and the speed of the black mist spreading faster and faster. If they can't find a way to solve the black fog, then they will be swallowed by the black fog. Tony Stark frowned, and then said, "Energy will be assimilated, so will technology be assimilated." Quote, "I'll send her a rocket launcher to try." Saying that, Tony Stark put on his armor again, and then fired rocket launchers, palm cannons, laser cannons, etc. into the black fog, and he used them all. And these attacks, falling into the black fog, were like stones sinking into the sea, and in the end they couldn't even stir up a little wave. Death. How can we stop death? Star-Lord kept thinking with his head down. After a long while, he suddenly looked at Groot. Death and life. Groot, try to see if your ability can resist her. Groot held his mobile phone in both hands and slowly raised his head, with a bit of silence of autistic children. After a while, he said, "I'm Groot." Quote, "Try it quickly." Star-Lord looked at the approaching black fog with a bit of nervousness, watching as if Groot was about to turn his hand into a rattan and reach into the black mist. Thor grabbed Groot. "It's useless. It is the goddess of death, and life, death, and soul are in her hands. Could it be that we are waiting here to die?" Star-Lord frowned. He looked at Lin Ang. "Lin Ang, is there anything you can do?" He felt that among these people now, the most reliable estimate was only Lin Ang. Lin Ang pointed to the ground. Everyone followed the direction of his finger. "Below. There's nothing down there." Rocket looked at Lin Ang with a bit of doubt. Lin Ang sighed lightly. Before he could speak, Mella's eyes lit up and she couldn't help but say, "Lord Lin Ang, do you mean that your ability is not afraid of her attacks?" There really was nothing strange under their feet, but there was a swirling black and white whirlpool. The vortex was not large, just below them, protecting them inside. Lin Ang smiled and nodded. His ability comes from the goddess of death, and it can be said that it has the same root and origin as her ability. The two are identical and exclusive. In the whirlpool of life and death, it is a safe place. Those black fogs could not invade inside anyway. If it weren't for this, with the speed at which the power of the goddess of death spread, these people would have been surrounded by black mist long ago. "What do we do now?" Nefri asked with a bit of anxiety. Although they are now protected by Lin Ang in the whirlpool, there will be no life safety for the time being. But there is a goddess of death standing outside, which is always terrifying. Do you want me to say, or are we going to consume it? Maybe one day he will be bored and leave. Peter Parker shrugged and muttered softly. "Goddess of death, life is endless, fight a war of attrition with him." Dr. Banner frowned. Then he looked at Lin Ang. "If I want to say, it's better for Mage Lin Ang to open the portal of teleportation. Let's get out of here." Nick Fury shook his head. "Where can we go?" Quote, "I think she should not let us go. With the ability of the goddess of death, it is not difficult to find us. If we go back to Blue Star now, then we will bring disaster back." Steve didn't look at Lin Ang when he left. "Sorcerer Lin Ang, what good can you do?" Lin Ang didn't care what they were talking about at this time. All his mental power and attention were attracted by those black mist. These black fogs seem simple, like the diffusion of energy. But in fact, these black fogs are made up of very small molecules. You can't see anything without looking closely. But if you feel it carefully, you can feel that those who die are mobilized from the body by these molecules. This feeling is very similar to the water molecule manipulation used by Mela. But here's the difference. The energy that the goddess of death can control is even greater, and her power is directly applied to human life and soul. Lin Ang tried to mobilize the vortex of life and death under his feet, learning the principle of the black mist diffusion of the goddess of death, and spreading outward little by little, to touch the black mist that the goddess of death spreads. At the moment when the whirlpool and the black mist merge with each other, Lin Ang suddenly felt that the black and white vortex under his feet suddenly injected an extremely huge force into his body. That power does not come from death, but from life. The vortex of life and death released the black mist released by the goddess of death, which could devour life, into vitality energy and inject it into his body. Just for a moment, Lin Ang felt an extremely subtle feeling. It seems that the whole world and the universe have established a subtle connection with him. He seemed to be able to sense the changes in life in several dimensions and planets around him. There was a mess of information and energy, little by little gathered in his body. "Congratulations, observing the life forbidden area of the goddess of death, you have comprehended and created the forbidden spell Life Control. It can control a person's life and death, and can be exchanged for life through replacement." After comprehending this ability, this sentence automatically appeared in his mind. Lin Ang touched his eyebrows, dispelling the messy information from his mind. Disconnect yourself from other dimensions and planets in the universe, and no longer accept the life and death Kaaba. He set his sights on the goddess of death. And the goddess of death also seemed to have discovered something, and her gaze towards Lin Ang was full of anger. But in addition to anger, there was also a touch of fear and worry in her eyes that could not be dissolved. She seemed to be afraid of something. Lin Ang waved his hand. The vortex of life and death under everyone's feet disappeared instantly. Seeing this scene, everyone's hearts couldn't help but rise. They were a little worried, afraid that something was wrong with Lin Ang's magic. They were all gathered together now. Once something went wrong with Lin's magic, then they will die together. Lord Lin Ang, Nick Fury swallowed nervously, and then asked in a low voice. Your magic. He wanted to ask if the magic had failed. Lin Ang waved his hand towards him. No need. He raised his head and flashed a faint and modest smile towards the goddess of death. Then he raised his hand and clicked in the air towards the goddess of death. Just instantly, the body of the goddess of death has undergone tremendous changes. The original goddess of death, wearing a black cloak and hood, revealed half of her skeleton face at the end of the weekend. And now, the body of the goddess of death suddenly plumped, and the black cloak on her body turned into stars and scattered black light. Her original appearance was also revealed. It's a very memorable face. It's just that her face is very ugly, and it can even be said to be a little hideous. She looked at Lin Ang's gaze as if she wanted to kill. And Lin Ang used the forbidden spell life control as if he didn't see it. The goddess of death clearly felt that her energy, as well as endless life, was being consumed at an extremely fast rate. According to this level of consumption, in less than 3 minutes, she will really die in the hands of this kid. The goddess of death was very unwilling, and she used the same power to resist. It's just that this can only reduce the speed of her endless life and disappear a little. She will still go to extinction after all. For a while, she regretted it a little. I already knew that I wouldn't come to this trip. Not only did he not get Thanos' soul, but even his own life was to be lost here. Die. Lin Ang clenched his hands fiercely. The goddess of death only felt that the power in her body was depleting faster. The disappearance of energy made her feel a deep sense of powerlessness. In less than 3 minutes, the goddess of death fell into a coma, and finally turned into countless dark energy light masses, scattered all around. Watch the goddess of death collapse and collapse. Thor couldn't help but hold the storm tomahawk, opened his mouth, and looked at Lin Ang. At this time, he looked at Lin Ang as if he was looking at a monster. That's the goddess of death. One of the 5 gods of creation. He killed the dead girl just like that. Isn't that too simple? He couldn't help but reach out and hold his head and knock hard. In his memory, Blue Star was a very fragile planet. The people on the Blue Star are not strong, the population is exploding, and the scientific and technological civilization is not very developed, and it can even be said that it is a somewhat backward planet. But now, he couldn't help but look at Lin Ang. He had the illusion that Blue Star was dangerous. It is possible that the most dangerous person he can meet in his life is the guardian of this time gem of Blue Star. At the same time, he is also sighing. Fortunately, this person belongs to the same camp as them, otherwise it would be a headache. Peter Parker the Spider-Man looked at the disappearing goddess of death, and then at Lin Ang. He now suddenly felt that perhaps for Thanos, Lin Ang was the biggest villain. This second-by-second approach doesn't look like the hard life that a superhero should live at all. Think of Tony Stark, the building that was bombed I don't know how many times. Think again, no matter who you play against, it is the captain who is beaten all day long. Finally, think about Wanda who died a man. Peter Parker couldn't help but feel that Lin Ang was not at the same level of existence as them at all. They were the ones who were beaten. And Lin Ang is the one who beats people. Xingju looked at the goddess of death who had disintegrated and destroyed, and then looked at Lin Ang, and he couldn't help the corners of his mouth twitching desperately. He really wanted to ask now, is a magician really so strong? Thanos is not counting in seconds, even the 5 creation gods he killed. Isn't this a bit too strong? Is this really a human being? Black Widow looked at Lin Ang with a shocked expression. For Lin Ang's strength, she had some understanding when he fought against Ebony Throat. She knew that Lin Yang's strength was very strong. Maybe even better than all of them, shield. But there should also be a limit to this strength. She never dared to open it so big in her dreams. Mela, on the other hand, looked at Lin Ang eagerly with a look of adoration at this time. She likes strong men. I prefer this man who saved himself, helped himself improve his strength, and lended his strength to himself. Watching him get stronger and stronger, she became happier and happier. Lin Ang looked at the scattered black energy masses. His eyes narrowed slightly. Life control. He has tried the power of death. The power of life has not yet been experimented with. Thinking of this, he set his eyes on those scattered black energy masses. Then he used the power of life control. Those black energy masses began to condense and converge. Then the shape of a person is formed. Everyone who was originally shocked that Lin Ang had killed the goddess of death was suddenly confused by his hand. I don't know what he wants to do. But at this time, Lin Ang's concentrated appearance made them dare not disturb too much. They watched Lin Ang carefully. It was found that those black energy masses actually condensed into the form of a woman. This woman's body is about 1.7 meters. His black hair hangs to the ground, his body is bumpy, and his face is beautiful, which is unforgettable at a glance. It's just that this woman, the more you look at it, the more she looks a bit like the goddess of death in her final form. Peter Parker, the little Spider-Man, scratched his head, looked at Mela with some doubt, and then asked in a low voice, "What is Mage Lin Ang doing?" Mela looked at Lin Ang equally suspiciously. Looking at Lin Ang's current movements, it seems that he wants to resurrect the goddess of death. But wasn't this goddess of death what he had just defeated and killed? Next to him, Xingju looked at Lin Ang with wide eyes, and he exhaled with a somewhat incredible whisper. He doesn't want to resurrect her. Could it be that he has the power to bring people back to life? Nick Fury's eyes darkened. He also knows something about Lin Ang's joining the Justice League. I heard that the Justice League's Superman has been resurrected. He thought that there must be Lin Ang's handwriting in this. Then it is not impossible for him to resurrect the goddess of death now. It's just that they were still hostile to the goddess of death just now, and now he is going to resurrect her. Thor didn't speak, he just stared at the goddess of death in front of Lin Ang with a pair of eyes. His people suffered heavy casualties. Adagas was also completely destroyed. If Lin Ang has the power to bring people back to life, then, maybe he can save his lost people. Lin Ang uses life control to give new life to the goddess of death. It's just that the goddess of death who has been reborn, although she still has the power of the goddess of death, but she is no longer the goddess of death before. When he had successfully fused all his energy, he took 3 steps back and said, "It's time to wake up." Quote. Everyone present was stunned for a moment, and they took a few steps back to avoid any accidents. After a moment, the goddess of death suddenly opened her eyes. A dark light flashed under her eyes, and a black cloak appeared on her, wrapping her delicate body entirely. Her expression was stiff, her eyes were a little dull, and she walked in front of Lin Ang. Then he knelt on the ground put his hands on his chest, and respectfully shouted, "Master." Quote. Her master's word came out, which immediately frightened many people. Quote exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark quote. Tony Stark looked at Lin Ang with a shocked expression, and then looked at the goddess of death. Just returned to a hostile relationship, and now becomes a master and servant. Isn't this changing too fast? And how the hell did he do it? To one of the 5 creation gods, kill, and resurrect if you say resurrection. Tony Stark looked at Lin Ang suspiciously. Brother, you shouldn't be hiding any powerful identity. Like a little more awesome than the creator god. Lin Ang smiled and shook his head at him. The small skill of carving insects is not enough to hang teeth. Tony Stark only felt speechless. If Lin Ang is called a carving insect trick, so what are these people in the Avengers? Like Nick Fury said. These people combined, I am afraid that they can't beat Lin Ang alone. Nick Fury looked at Lin Ang, and couldn't help but feel a pang of excitement in his heart, followed by a burst of irritation. Lin Ang's existence can be said to be the strongest guardian of Blue Star. This delighted him. After all, Blue Star is too fragile, and with the protection of a strong person like Lin Ang, the degree of security has improved a lot. But what amazed him was this awesome mage Lin Ang. He is the supreme mage of Karmatage, this is the boss of Karmatage, he will not join S.H.I.E.L.D. anyway. Moreover, he didn't have the face to invite Lin Ang to S.H.I.E.L.D. anymore. After all, this disaster can be said to be solved by Lin Ang alone. These people are completely escorts. The role played by these people is not even as good as the beautiful beauty beside him. Captain America Steve looked at Lin Ang with a complicated expression. To be honest, at the beginning, he had doubts about Lin Ang's strength. I think director Nick Fury they said too much. Even if Lin Ang really has the ability, he will not be ridiculously strong. But it turns out, director Nick Fury and they did not know Lin Ang's true strength. The strength that Lin Ang has shown is far from comparable. These people of S.H.I.E.L.D. Avengers are not at the same level as him at all. Before, when Lin Ang pocketed those Infinity Stones, he was actually a little worried. I was afraid that after Lin Ang got those gems, he would do something harmful to Blue Star. But now he wasn't worried. Because even without those Infinity Stones, if Lin Ang really wanted to destroy Blue Star, it would only be a matter of minutes. Just when they looked at Lin Ang with a complicated expression, Lin Ang was carefully observing the goddess of death in front of him. The newborn goddess of death. There are no memories of the past, and the body is also reshaped. It can be said that it is a whole new life. Even if she is exactly the same as before, she is no longer the same person. And this is exactly what Lin Ang wants. He didn't want to one day, his subordinates suddenly remembered what happened before and did something to betray him. After making sure that the goddess of death had no problem, Lin Ang looked at Director Nick Fury. Director Nick Fury, now that the matter has been settled, I am also going back to Kamatage. You guys, Lin Ang glanced at everyone, let's go back together. Quote. They were teleported by Lin Ang. If you leave them here, hee. Director Nick Fury immediately coughed twice. Trouble Lin Ang's in to send us back again. Lin Ang nodded slightly, and then teleported back to Blue Star with everyone. Blue Star, Karmatage, Sanctuary. Ji Yuyi, Wang, and Mordo sat around a square table drinking tea. Wang asked, Ancient Mage, do we really care about this matter? Quote. Ji Yuyi shook his head. Trust Lin Ang, since he said that he can solve it himself, then let's watch. Quote. Then Ji Yuyi looked at Mordo. The mages' practice situation should be hurried. Now that Blue Star is facing more and more danger, their strength seems to be a little weak. Mordo nodded. I think my strength is a little lacking now. Wang also nodded. He had felt this way when facing the Ebony Throat before. If their strength were stronger at that time, they would not need to open the portal to retreat. Ji Yuyi glanced at it thoughtfully, and then asked, how has Strange been lately? Quote. Speaking of shrantage, Mordo was silent again. Not only Lin Ang is extremely talented. Strange is not bad either. He also seems to have been born to eat the bowl of rice of magicians. Although he didn't learn things as quickly as Lin Ang, his progress was not as great as Lin Ang's, and even in terms of magical understanding, he was not as spiritual as Lin Ang. But he is also a true magical genius. If it weren't for Lin Ang for comparison, then he would definitely be the most dazzling genius. Unfortunately, he and Lin Ang entered Karmatage on the same day and began to practice magic at the same time. Lin Ang has become the supreme mage of Karmatage, and he is still an apprentice. His strength is already good, although it is still not as good as me and Wang. But now it's also the best among Karmatage. Furuichi nodded in satisfaction. Keep an eye on him and practice, don't let him go astray. I am very optimistic about him, but unfortunately he is too proud and too arrogant. These innate personalities, it is difficult to change. I am afraid that only by encountering some setbacks and poking his sharp chi fiercely can it be possible to truly become a mainstay. Wang looked at Ji Yuyi, and then said with a smile, has he encountered fewer setbacks? Quote. Originally a genius doctor, he ended up in a car accident and lost his hands. Now come to Karmatage to learn magic, originally with his magical talent, should become an extremely dazzling existence, but he ran into Lin Ang, a monster. Compared with Lin Ang, he became a little cabbage. Sometimes, Wang wondered if he could continue to persevere. But to his surprise, Strange was very determined. Wang suddenly seemed to have thought of something. By the way, I heard that Lin Angzhen seems to have developed something interesting. Quote. He said that those things can help mages improve their strength. I don't know when he'll be able to come back. Ji Yuyi narrowed his eyes slightly, and couldn't help but think of the talisman that Lin Ang had issued to everyone before. It is precisely because of that talisman that the mages of Karmatage have now improved their cultivation speed a lot. Not sure about this time. Just when Ji Yuyi and the three were chatting about Lin Ang, someone outside came in to report. Ancient Mage, Master Wang, Mage Mordo. Lin Angzhen is back. The mage who came to report was a little excited. Now at Karmatage, Lin Ang exists like faith. For his return, the mages of Karmatage were extremely excited. Oh, Lin Ang is back. A hint of joy also appeared in Ji Yuyi's eyes. For this enemy, she also learned something through the little girl left by Shield. This person's purpose is the Infinity Stones, and he has gathered so many powers of the Infinity Stones, and it is very difficult to fight against them. Even the slightest mistake can lead to disaster. Ji Yuyi stood up, and then said to Wang and Mordu, "Go, let's go and welcome the return of the Supreme Mage." 3 days later, behind the training square of Karmatage, many mages gathered around a new building. They looked at this building that had risen overnight and couldn't help but talk about it. "What kind of building is this? I didn't see it yesterday, why am I here today?" Quote, "I felt an extremely majestic magical power from above." Looking at the building in front of him, Slantek couldn't help but narrow his eyes and reach out and put his hand on it. His body couldn't help but twitch. His movements were so great that everyone around him noticed him. "Hey, Shrantage, are you all right? It can't be that there's something wrong with this building." As soon as this man's voice fell, someone immediately refuted. "Don't talk nonsense." And at this time, Slanteki's hand was removed from the building. He looked at the building with a bit of nervousness and shock. At that moment, he seemed to have arrived in a very different space. In addition, he witnessed the rise and decay of different spaces and different planets at a very fast speed. It was an indescribable feeling. He looked at the building in front of him with a bit of shock, with a bit of distraction. For some reason, in the back of his heart, he had the idea of touching it again. "Shrantage, what happened to you just now?" Someone next to him questioned him. Although Slanteki's current status in Karmatage cannot be compared with Linang, but everyone is also very concerned about him. He is the fastest improving among the mages of Karmatage today, except for Lin Ang. Mordo and Koichi even said, if it wasn't for Lin Ang, then it was likely that the one who took over Karmatage would be Slantage. And at this very time, Lin Ang took Wang and Mordo to the training ground of Karmatage. Lin Angzan, the mages on the training ground respectfully performed an ancient salute towards Lin Ang. This is the ritual performed after meeting the Supreme Mage. It is an act of respect that the mages show respect for the Supreme Mage. Lin Ang nodded towards everyone, and then walked to the building with Wang and Mordo. This makes the new building emerge, with a total of 6 floors. It looks like a tall tower. Coming to the bottom of the tower, he saw Slantage, who he had not seen for a long time. It can be seen that Slantage has been living very comfortably in the recent period. His hands also seem to have been able to be used normally through magic. Lin Ang walked to the bottom of the tower, and then looked at everyone on the training ground. "Don't be nervous. This tall tower was built by me to improve everyone's strength." Lin Ang's voice just landed. Sranchi suddenly raised his head sharply, and he looked at Lin Ang with a look of disbelief. Just now, he had personally experienced the magic of this tower. Although he only touched the outer wall of the tower, the feedback he gave him can definitely be described as magical. Was such a magic tower actually built by Lin Ang? The look in Slantage's eyes when he looked at Lin Ang was quite complicated. He and Lin entered Karmatage to study magic. It could even be said that he was exposed to magic a few days earlier than Lin Ang. But the distance between him and Lin Ang seemed to be gradually widening. He was still an ordinary magic apprentice, and Lin Ang had become a respected supreme mage. Shrantage couldn't help but secretly glance at Lin Ang. At Karmatage, everyone says that he is a genius and is truly made for magicians. But now, after seeing Lin Ang, he couldn't help but sigh. If he was a genius and was born to be a magician, what about Lin Ang? What kind of existence is he? But before his self-pity was over, he heard a cry of joy and ecstasy in his ears. The sound was so loud that he felt like his head and ears were about to explode. He couldn't help but look around. Only then did he realize that it was just now. Lin Ang had finished speaking, and he had already turned sideways and let Wang and Mordo lead the group into the magic tower. Slantek stood at the bottom of the tower, looking up at the tower, his eyes a little empty, not knowing what he was thinking. "Shrantage, aren't you going in?" Wang didn't know when he came to his side. He looked at Slantage's gaze and couldn't help but have some doubts in his eyes. "Go in." Shrantage shook his head to sober himself up a bit, and then walked towards the tower. I saw that everyone had already entered the tower. Wang walked to Lin Ang's side, and then asked in a low voice. Lord Lin Angzan, can those guys do it? Isn't this too much power? Wang looked at the tower with some concern. Lin Ang looked at the magic tower and shook his head. They will never grow without putting them through real battles. Oh magician, what do you do when you don't fight, learn magic? Is it used to perform magic tricks and juggle? This magic tower was built by him with 6 infinity stones. Overlay space with space gems. From the outside, this magic tower seems to have only 6 floors, but the space inside is extremely large and can be described as endless. The time flow rate inside, adjusted by him with the time gem, is an hour outside and a whole day inside. And everything in it is real. Everything inside has been transformed into a real existence through the transformation of the real gemstone. That is, everything that appears inside the magic tower is real. Mordo and Wang looked at each other. Then Wang sighed softly. I'm afraid they won't be able to bear it. Before those mages entered the magic tower, Wang, Mordu, and Ji Yuyi had already gone in to check in advance. The situation inside was more dangerous than they thought. Last time, if it weren't for Ji Yuyi following, it might not be possible for the two of them to come out of it smoothly. God knows how horrified they were the last time they were in the magic tower and saw Dormammu again. Looking at their expressions, Lin Ang knew what they were thinking. Lin Ang glanced at them. Then said, the stronger the strength, the greater the danger you will encounter inside. The meaning is obvious, you follow Ji Yuyi into it, and the nature you encounter is a strange match with Ji Yuyi, and you can fight to have ghosts. And I set up insurance inside, even if those guys really can't beat it, it will be fine. Oh, Wang and Mordo were a little curious. The last time they entered, they didn't find any insurance. At that time, they were almost swallowed by Dormammu, and they did not see anyone to rescue them. Lin Ang smiled mysteriously at them and did not answer their words. He arranged the goddess of death in the tower. The mages of Karma Taj, even if they are really weak, they can't die. Besides, his purpose in building this tower is to improve their strength. Could it be true that it will make them skip the level and fight monsters? Wang and Mordo were just accidents that time. After all, Ji Yuyi's strength is not comparable to ordinary people, and if they go with it, they can only be regarded as unlucky. On the other side, the Kamaji magicians walked into the tower. After entering the tower, they discovered the magic of the tower. This seems to be another planet. Quote, some people looked at their surroundings in amazement. Just by looking at their surroundings and the green sun overhead, they knew that this would definitely not be a blue star. Is it illusion space? Someone asked. No, this is not an illusion, this is real. A kind of magician, looking at the situation around them with a look of amazement, the shock in their hearts was incomparable. Oh my God, this turned out to be inside a building. That's amazing. Quote, what else can't Lin Angzan do? A kind of mage was amazed. They just walked into the tower, and the surrounding area turned into an endless world. It doesn't seem to be a mirror space. What is this place? Lord Lin Angzan won't have teleported us to an alien planet. After the initial excitement and shock, all that remains in their hearts is nervousness and apprehension about the unknown. Slantek frowned. He always felt that this matter would not be so simple. With Lin Ang's ability, if he wanted to teleport them to other planets, it was enough to open a teleportation door, and there was no need to build such a tower. Moreover, the strange feeling he had just felt outside the tower was also clearly told to him. This tower, it's not that simple. It's not a matter of standing here, let's go and take a look. Right at this time, a loud roar suddenly came from the surroundings. The mages were taken aback. What is that? Everyone looked in the direction where the voice came from. At this look, I couldn't help but be surprised. The 6 or 7 meters tall tree was running towards them like a person. Run, come on. Quote, I don't know who shouted it. A kind of magician quickly pulled out his legs and ran. In less than 10 minutes, they were surrounded by tree people. Looking at the towering trees, Karma Taj's mages fell silent. Due to the lack of combat experience, none of them knew what to do at this time. At this time, outside the tower, Lin Ang, Wang and Mordo were watching the live broadcast. Look at the performance of those magicians. All three couldn't help but shake their heads in unison. Your Holiness is right, these guys' combat experience is indeed too poor. Since they were entering for the first time, they specifically lowered the difficulty. But even so, the first moment they encountered danger, they were ready to run. It's normal. Lin Ang looked at the water mirror picture and couldn't help but sigh softly. Although Karma Taj taught these mages very carefully. But after all, they don't have much experience in battle, and on weekdays, what magic the king and Mordo let them use, they use whatever magic. Let them attack there, and they will attack there. In team battles, this may not be a problem. But when they go it alone, or when no one tells them what to do, the danger becomes apparent. The mage of Karma Taj he wants is able to be independent and self-reliant. These people, there is still the grind. In about half an hour, the magicians who had entered the magic tower before came out. Their faces were a little distracted. Some of them even touched their bodies nervously, as if to confirm something. I'm alive. Quote, God, this is so real, I thought I was going to die. Me too. One by one, they sighed with palpitations. Just now, they were surrounded by tree people. Tough vines and branches pierced their bodies. The severe pain made them all think that they were really going to die. Watch the magicians teleporting out of the magic tower. Both Wong and Mordo breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, they finally knew what insurance Lin Ang was talking about. They don't really die inside. When you encounter mortal danger, although it hurts, you will feel dead. But in reality, they didn't really have an accident. And what they don't know is, these magicians really died once. It's just that with the goddess of death there, they're fine. And this is also the real purpose of Lin Ang's resurrection of the goddess of death. No fear of death. Let these mages, like the day of destruction, continue to experience death, little by little, looking for their own shortcomings, little by little to improve and evolve themselves. After finding out that it will not really die, Karma Taj's mages are crazy. With such an excellent training ground, then what are they afraid of? Come on. For a time, all the mages of Karma Taj were apprentices who were still learning magic, except for just getting started. The other mages began to storm the magic tower. And this time they found out. Every time they enter the tower, the situation is completely different. This is also too powerful. It's worthy of Lin Angzhen. Such magic towers can be built. Quote, although dead and alive inside, but my magic speed has increased a lot, and I was not skilled in magic before, but now I use it to fly. Quote, what are you waiting for? Karma Taj and everyone fell into the craze of storming the magic tower. Even Ji Yuyi, Wong and Mordo all plunged into the magic tower. At this time, Lin Ang came to the big library of Karma Taj. Some of the magic books in the Karma Taj Great Library were collected, and some of them were created by the Karma Taj mages themselves. At Karma Taj all knowledge is shared. He looked at the library, then his eyes narrowed. He thought he could record those forbidden spells. As for whether the other mages of Karma Taj can understand it, can they learn it? Then it depends on their luck. Think so. Lin Ang wrote down his forbidden spell magic one by one, then sealed it and placed it in the deepest part of the large library. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.